Hey, good evening. My name is Jeff Overton, and I'm welcoming you this evening to the Oʻahu Army Training Land Retention EIS Public Scoping Zoom webinar. We are coming to you virtually this evening. We had fully intended to be meeting with you in person at Leilehua Golf Course. Fortunately, with the change, the directive from the governor on terms of limitations on meeting, we've now had to hold this scoping session virtually. We thank you very much for participating with us this evening. This is the second. We held our first meeting last night, and this is our second and final public scoping meeting tonight. So we're looking forward to your comments on the EIS scope and direction here tonight. We will have several speakers and a presentation for you, and then we will get to the comment period, which is really the reason we're here together tonight to get to this. If I could just walk through some basic house rules on how we're going to operate tonight. We're going to ask that you please hold your comments through the presentation phase of tonight. There will be a comment period at the end of the presentation. Probably take us about 25-30 minutes to get to that point as we walk through the presentation. Then we're going to ask for you to please raise your hand to be called upon to speak and give oral comments. You will be given 2 minutes to give your presentation, and we'll kind of warn you with about 30 seconds to go and ask you to wrap up. Last night we had a good number of speakers and everyone had a chance to get in. That's the reason we're trying to keep to a nice efficient schedule here, but we'll ask for you to remain muted until it is your turn to speak. You may also call in to record oral comments instead of waiting to speak on this Zoom webinar. Our telephone number for recording your comments is 808-556-8277. That phone line will remain open through August 12th, midnight. So we have 3 full days basically with the phone line open. So how can you submit comments on this EIS process? Your input is extremely valuable to us, and we appreciate your time here participating tonight and when you prepare your comments to send in. Our comment period is actually expanded to 40 days, which is 10 days longer than the normal state EIS process. Our publication was on July 23rd, which was the notice of preparation, this kind of skinny book that you can download off the Army website. And that website location for this information is home.army.mil/hawaii/index.php/Oʻahu EIS. It's here on the screen. It'd be really easy for you to just take a snapshot of this screen, or with your smart device, you can use the QR code here, and that will launch you to the Army EIS website. All this information is posted on there. Many of the presentation materials, as well as that notice of preparation of EIS that I just showed you. You can send us an email using the Army's email site. This is usarmy.hawaii.nepa@mail.mil. And this is all listed here on the slide. We also have a mailing address where you can send us your letter. Oʻahu ATLR EIS comments at P.O. Box 3444, Honolulu, Hawaii 96801. We'd love to hear from you tonight, and we will have a oral comment session here. And again, if you wanted to leave a comment on the phone line, you definitely can do that at that 556-8277 phone number. This slide is an old slide. We actually extended the comment period through midnight tomorrow, the 12th. So we're ready to get going here. We have brief opening remarks from Colonel Daniel Misagoy. He is the commander of the U.S. Army Garrison, Hawaii. Colonel Misagoy.
Thank you. Aloha, everyone. I'm Colonel Dan Misegoy, Commander, U.S. Army Garrison, Hawaii. I want to thank you for taking the time to learn more about the Army's plan to prepare an environmental impact statement, or EIS, to analyze what the Army should do in the future with approximately 6,300 acres of state-owned land at 3 Oahu training sites. Those training sites include sites at Kahuku Training Area, Pu'umoho, and Makua Military Reservation. The Army has leased the state-owned lands at these 3 training areas since 1964, and those leases will expire in August 2029. The Environmental Impact Statement, which is governed by the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, and the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act, or HEPA, began with the publication of the Notice of Intent, or NOI. The NOI was published in the Federal Register on July 23rd, which announced the Army's intention to prepare an EIS and also kicked off a 40-day public scoping period, which runs from July 23rd through September 1st. The scoping process is an opportunity to publicly introduce the project and to receive input on the scope of what will be analyzed in the EIS. The Army is committed to being as open and transparent as possible while also complying with NEPA and HEPA to publish an EIS that is comprehensive and complete. I encourage you to learn more about the Army's proposal to retain the state-owned lands at the 3 Oahu training areas, and then submit your comments on what you believe the EIS should study and include. Regardless of how you comment, online, via mail, or through a recorded message, each comment will carry the same weight, and all comments will be considered as to what the EIS should analyze to inform the Army on what lands it should pursue retaining. We're looking forward to your input. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Colonel Misegoy. Appreciate those opening remarks. Okay, we have about a 15-slide presentation that walks you through some of the basic information that's presented in our environmental impact statement preparation notice. So this will be very informative, give you background, and then we'll return to open up the comment period. Thank you.
Welcome to the Scoping Open House for the Army Training Land Retention. So we encourage attending only one session to allow opportunity for others to participate due to potential capacity limitations respecting social distancing protocol. Live streaming is available for online viewing and listening. Details can be found on our website at the URL provided on this poster. You may also access the website using a smartphone through the QR code on poster number 3. Presentation materials are also available on this Oʻahu EIS website. It is important to note that both the in-person scoping sessions and EIS website feature the same information. This presentation, scoping materials, and additional information about the proposed action and the EIS are available on the website at the URL address provided on this poster. 2 hybrid in-person online sessions are currently planned. The in-person events include a personal greeting and introduction by the Army, followed by this video poster presentation. Options to view and/or listen to the proceedings remotely are available on the website. For those attending in person, posters discussing online contents and other presentation materials will be set around the meeting hall for viewing. Once the scoping period has concluded, the Army will review, consider, and incorporate substantive comments during the development of the draft EIS. This draft EIS will be made available for public and agency review for at least 45 days. The draft EIS public comment period is tentatively scheduled for late 2022 to early 2023. The scoping period started on July 23, 2021 and ends September 1, 2021. In addition to the poster viewing stations, these in-person scoping session events will have printed project information packets available, comment drop boxes to submit written comments, information on how to submit written comments via website, email, or U.S. Postal Service mail, and scoping comment stations for individuals to provide oral comments via phone. In-person attendees may also provide live comments from a speaker podium set up in the meeting venue. Comment station staff will be available to assist those who wish to provide comments. Attendees wishing to provide oral comments during the scoping session events may sign up to do so through the speaker sign-in sheet at the entrance. There will be no question and answer session at the speaker podium or the comment stations. Oral comments may be provided through the comment stations or by personal phone by calling area code 808-556-8277. Outside the in-person sessions, written comments will be accepted throughout the entire scoping period via the EIS website. Email to usarmy.hawaii.nepa@mail.mil and U.S. Postal Service mail to O'ahu ATLR EIS Comments, P.O. Box 3444, Honolulu, Hawaii 96801-3444 as noted on this poster. Throughout the 40-day scoping period, you can find scoping materials and information on the proposed action at the EIS website. You may access the website through the QR code on this page using a smartphone or smart device. Thank you for taking the time to participate, and we look forward to receiving your input. Questions should be directed to the U.S. Army Garrison Hawaii Public Affairs Office at area code 808-656-3158. The National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, is an environmental law that ensures sufficient environmental information for federally funded projects is available to decision makers, public officials, and members of the public before a decision is made and an action is implemented. The Hawaii Environmental Policy Act, or HEPA, is the state's EIS process that similarly establishes a system of environmental reviews to guide decision-making. The proposed action is federally funded and includes consideration of retaining up to approximately 6,300 acres of state-owned land. For these reasons, the EIS will be a joint NEPA-HEPA document with concurrent public involvement processes to comply with both laws. The joint NEPA-HEPA public involvement opportunities include the following: a 40-day public scoping period, as noted in the NEPA Notice of Intent, or NOI, the HEPA EIS Preparation Notice, or EISPN, and local newspaper notices. Written comments will be accepted throughout the 40-day public scoping period. An EIS scoping open house with hybrid online in-person sessions and an oral comment phone line. A HEPA Cultural Impact Assessment, or CIA, is being conducted to evaluate the potential impacts of the proposed action on cultural resources and traditional practices within a defined area. The CIA is an in-depth process and is expected to take approximately 1 year to complete. The CIA process includes a public notice, literature reviews, and consultation with practitioners, Native Hawaiian organizations, stakeholders, and other individuals. A minimum 45-day comment period and public meetings will then be planned to solicit comments on the draft EIS. That concludes the overview of the proposed action. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, we welcome you to submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. The EIS process includes 9 significant milestones for the various federal and state processes. The first milestone is preparing a draft description of the proposed action and alternatives, or DOPAA. The draft DOPAA provides background information, defines the scope of the EIS and public participation, and describes the proposed action and alternatives. It eventually becomes the first 2 chapters of the EIS. The second milestone is the publication of the NOI in the Federal Register and the EISPN in the state of Hawaii's the Environmental Notice, which initiates the public scoping period. The third milestone, and where we are currently, is public scoping. The purpose of the scoping period is to gather public input early in the EIS process. At the conclusion of the public scoping period, public and agency comments will be reviewed for consideration and the draft EIS will be developed. Once the draft EIS is ready for review, the fourth milestone is publishing the Notice of Availability for the draft EIS in the Federal Register, the draft EIS and the Environmental Notice, and notice in local newspapers. A copy of the draft EIS will be made available to the public and agencies for a minimum 45-day comment period. The fifth milestone is to host in-person events for the public to present and solicit comments on the draft EIS. The public meetings will be held within the DEIS comment period. Upon completion of the public scoping events and draft EIS public comment period, a final EIS will be developed. The sixth milestone is to publish a Notice of Availability for the final EIS in the Federal Register, the final EIS in the Environmental Notice, and notice in local newspapers. The final EIS is released to the public and agencies, which initiates a 30-day waiting period. The 30-day waiting period is not a comment period. The seventh milestone is the state's HEPA final EIS acceptability determination. After the 30-day waiting period has concluded, the eighth milestone is to publish the Record of Decision in the Federal Register. The ninth milestone is to implement the actions selected in the Record of Decision. These milestones illustrate the primary steps in the process through which the Army will consider the potential impacts of the proposed action and solicit and incorporate valuable public and agency comments. That concludes the discussion of the EIS process. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, we welcome you to submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. The U.S. government uses approximately 18,060 acres at Kahuku Training Area, Kawailoa Po'amohu Training Area, and Makua Military Reservation, where the Army has been for the past 6 decades. Of these lands, approximately 6,300 acres are leased from the state. The Army is proposing to retain up to approximately 6,300 acres of state-owned land on Oahu for a variety of reasons, including the following. The U.S. government's current lease of this land expires in 2029. Without action, the state-owned land would no longer be available for military training. The state-owned land is essential to military training on Oahu. It supports numerous training activities, maneuver areas, and capabilities that are essential to the Army, other military services, and local agencies. Lastly, military personnel trained to a high standard are better prepared to accomplish their mission and return home safely to their families and communities. Loss of these lands would reduce the ability of the Army, other military services, and local agencies to meet their training requirements and mission readiness. That concludes the discussion of retaining state-owned land on Oahu. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, we welcome you to submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. The Kahuku Training Area, or KTA, is located in the northern end of the Ko'olau Mountains in northeast Oahu. This area consists of approximately 9,480 acres, with 1,170 acres leased from the state. The area is used for ground maneuver and helicopter flight training, and is shown in posters 11 and 12. The Kawailoa Po'amohu Training Area, or Po'amohu, is located in central Oahu on the western slope of the Ko'olau Mountains. This area consists of approximately 4,370 acres and is entirely owned by the state. This area is used for low-altitude helicopter flight training and is shown in posters 11 and 13. The Makua Military Reservation, or MMR, is located in northwest Oahu, overlapping Makua and Kahana-Ha'iki valleys on the western flank of the Waianae mountain range. This area is used for aviation and assembly area operations training and is shown in posters 11 and 14. The proposed action includes retaining up to approximately 6,300 acres of state-owned land on Oahu in support of continued military training. One or more land retention methods could be used to retain the state-owned land. Retaining the state-owned land prior to the end of the current lease is important to prevent interruption of essential military training. After retention of the state-owned land, the Army would continue to conduct the current levels and types of military training, facility, utility, and infrastructure maintenance and repair activities. The Army would continue natural and cultural resources stewardship and mitigation on the state-owned land, and the Army would continue to permit and coordinate training and other activities on the state-owned land by other users. The proposed action does not involve new training, construction, or resource management on Oahu. Instead, it is a real estate action that would enable continued military use of the state-owned land. The purpose of the proposed action is to enable U.S. Army Hawaii to continue to conduct military training on state-owned land within KTA, Po'amohu, and MMR to meet its current and future training requirements. The need for the proposed action is to allow the military to meet current and future training and combat readiness requirements on Army-managed lands, including continuation of access between state and major parcels of U.S. government-owned or controlled land on Oahu, retain substantial Army infrastructure investments, allow for future facility and infrastructure modernization, preserve limited maneuver area, provide training in a challenging environment, and maximize use of the impact area in support of Army coordinated training. That concludes the overview of the proposed action. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, we welcome you to submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. This poster summarizes alternatives being analyzed at the 3 project locations. The 3 project sites, all training areas, are shown on the map on this poster. Alternative 1 is the full retention alternative. Under this alternative, all state-owned lands would be retained at KTA, Po'amohu, and MMR. Alternative 1 would allow the Army to retain its substantial investment in facilities, utilities, and infrastructure on state-owned land, continue military training and other activities without downtime, and conduct future modernization of the facilities, utilities, and infrastructure within the state-owned land. Additionally, it would enable the Army to continue to have full access between state-owned lands and U.S. government-owned or controlled portions of KTA, Po'amohu, and MMR. Alternative 2 is the modified retention alternative. Under this alternative, the Army would retain state-owned lands at KTA, Po'amohu, and MMR. Additionally, the Army would retain all Army-owned utilities, fire breaks, fuel breaks, and fire access roads in the state-owned land not retained to enable safe operation of the U.S. government-owned land and retained state-owned lands. Alternative 2 would allow the Army to retain much of its substantial investment in facilities, utilities, and infrastructure on state-owned land, continue military training and other activities without downtime, and conduct future modernization of the facilities, utilities, and infrastructure within the retained state-owned land. Additionally, it would enable the Army to continue to have access between the U.S. government-owned or controlled portions of KTA, Po'amohu, and MMR, as well as access to the state-owned land not retained for wildfire protection and firefighting activities. Alternative 3 is the minimum retention alternative. This alternative only applies to MMR. This alternative would enable the Army to continue to use vital training and support facilities and associated maneuver land in the state-owned land, maintain and repair Army-owned utilities and infrastructure in the state-owned land, access all U.S. government-owned lands at MMR. Under the no-action alternative, the Army would not retain any of the state-owned land. Under this alternative, the Army would have no ability to train in or access the state-owned land after the leases expire, no longer fund or manage conservation and public use programs, potential archaeological sites, fire prevention and control services, and ungulate control on state-owned lands, and have no ability to use, maintain, or repair Army-owned utilities and infrastructure in the state-owned land that serve U.S. government-owned land, which would impact wildfire prevention and firefighting activities, as well as range and emergency services communication. The no-action alternative would compromise the integrity of training lands on the island of Oʻahu. There are a range of both U.S. military, state, and county government agencies that have used these state-owned lands in the past for training. If these lands are not retained, the U.S. military and possibly state and county agencies would be unable to effectively train on Oʻahu, which would result in a lack of military and local government agency readiness. That concludes the discussion of the no-action alternative. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, we welcome you to submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. The figures on this poster illustrates the Alternative 1 and Alternative 2 retention areas for Kahuku Training Area by the hatch marked area. The figures on this poster illustrates the Alternative 1 and Alternative 2 retention areas for Kawailoa Po'amohu Training Area by the hatch marked area. The figures on this poster illustrates the Alternative 1, 2, and 3 retention areas for Makua Military Reservation by the hatch marked area. That concludes the discussion of the alternatives for the 3 training areas. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, we welcome you to submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. The final poster is an overview of the key environmental topics the EIS will analyze. This poster identifies most, but not all of the subtopics that will be addressed in the EIS. The key environmental topics include land use, which includes items such as land use compatibility, easements, and real property management. Air quality and greenhouse gases, which covers ambient air quality standards, prevention of significant deterioration, and dust. Hazardous materials, which includes hazardous materials and waste, petroleum products, storage tanks, and unexploded ordnance. Geological and soil resources, which covers bedrock, seismology and other geological hazards, volcanology, soil properties, and erosion. Water resources, which include surface water, groundwater, floodplains, marine resources, and the Clean Water Act. Socioeconomics, which covers items such as demographics, housing, economic development, recreation, environmental justice, and protection of children. The latter 2 subtopics may become its own environmental justice section. Biological resources, which includes vegetation and wildlife, threatened and endangered species, invasive species, wetlands, and wildland fires. Noise, which covers noise zones and community and wildlife impacts. Transportation and traffic, which includes traffic, roadways, and air transportation, traffic volume, and level of congestion. Cultural resources, which covers archaeological resources, traditional religious and cultural properties, and other valued resources, traditional and customary practices, and historic buildings and structures. Utilities, which includes potable water, wastewater, stormwater, solid waste, electricity, and communications. Airspace, which covers controlled airspace, special use airspace, and military operations areas. Health and safety, which includes human health and safety danger zones. And electromagnetic spectrum, which covers radio waves to gamma waves, radio frequency, spectrum use, radar, and satellite. That concludes discussion of environmental topics to be analyzed in the EIS. If you have information you think is relevant to address in the EIS, please submit a comment during the EIS scoping period. This concludes our video presentation. This presentation, scoping materials, comment submittal information, additional information about the Army's proposed action and the EIS, and a contact for more information or accessibility requests are available on the EIS website. We appreciate your time and value your input. Please postmark or submit comments before the close of the 40-day scoping period on September 1st. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for watching the presentation with us, and that should give you good background on the starting place for our EIS. Again, we're at the very outset of the process, just beginning our analysis and all the studies. And what we're here for tonight is to receive input from you folks as participants to help us with the scope, direction of the studies for the environmental impact statement that we're undertaking. Okay, so are we up and
We can hear you
running?
again now.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone for going through the presentation with us, and apologize for any technical difficulties. We had to stand up these Zoom meetings kind of on a short fuse because we really wanted to be with you in person tonight at the Leilehua Golf Course. And unfortunately, with the change in the virus protocols, the governor has prohibited us really from meeting as a gathering. So thank you for attending tonight. We've got good participation this evening, and we're now entering the phase of the meeting where we will be taking your oral comments. Now, again, just a reminder that if you want to issue a comment in writing, you can do that through our email address, the usarmy.hawaii.nepa@mail.mil. So it's a very efficient way to send us a comment, or go on to the Army EIS website that we had provided before in the information. That is a good way to provide a written comment. You can also call on a phone line if you run out of time tonight and you want to make a comment. It will come through completely on the phone line. That's 808-556-8277. Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce Tricia Kehaulani Watson with Honua Consulting, and she will be helping us facilitate the discussion today. Again, we have some house rules here. Everybody needs to remain muted while we're taking turns here speaking. You're going to have 2 minutes once we call your name, and we're going to have on deck speaker's name also presented so that you can prepare to come on. With about 30 seconds left, we'll remind you that your time is closing rapidly, so please summarize your comments. We're trying to give everyone a chance to speak tonight. If we have extra time, we'll have people come up again later on, but we're going to give everyone a shot here. And we have, I see close to 90 participants in this session. So we're going to have your 2 minutes and we'll walk through that. So Leela Yoon is working with us and helping to announce those that are raising your hand in the function so that you can have your hand up, and we will call you in order as they appear, and we'll get going with this.
Hi, everybody. Leila, before we get started, I'm going to ask that if you had a chance to provide comments last night, we may let people who haven't had the opportunity to give their comments go first, but I promise we will get to all of you. So Leila, let's take them in order. And I see Tara and Thomas, and I think they spoke last night. So maybe after we let people go first, if that's okay with everybody. And let's just make sure we get everybody in at least once. So let's start with Ikaika.
We have Ikaika Ramones, followed by Kohan Pickmander.
Ikaika, are you with us? You should be, and you should be able to turn on your video, Ikaika, I believe. If you want, you don't have to. Ikaika, can you hear me? There you are.
Hi.
Hi, go ahead, please.
My name is Ikaika Ramones. I'm a social anthropologist completing my PhD at New York University and my bachelor's in anthropology from Harvard University. I'm Kanaka Maoli from Kalihi Valley. My research, funded in part by the National Science Foundation, includes how land use decisions directly impact us Native Hawaiians, and my data indicate that any EIS must take into account how these leases reproduce environmental racism and the dispossession of an Indigenous people from their lands. My data indicate that US military use of Hawaiian lands, the environmental and cultural damage done, is detrimental to a specific group of people, which contravenes the US government's own Civil Rights Act, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and the 1993 Clinton Apology Resolution. I also want to clarify that the bifurcation of the environmental and cultural is of issue here, as precedent has shown in regard to Indigenous people, that Hawaiian relations to land are at once cultural and environmental as a totality. That being so, any environmental damage is a cultural, health outcome, economic, and psychological damage. Any EIS must include biocultural impacts, especially with regard to Native Hawaiians. I also urge that a Hawaiian archaeological company, Noho Papa, is contracted to perform cultural impact assessment rather than other firms that have a demonstrated lack of cultural literacy and ethical conduct. Regardless of what mitigation is in place, the simple fact of the wanton use of Hawaiian lands represents a discriminant impact on Native Hawaiians. Any perfunctory or performative concessions would not address the systemic issue. The path most aligned with the state's own self-articulated institutional codes would be an EIS that addresses biocultural impacts amounting to a negation of these leases. And to my lahui and the occupying US military, this will be the next Kaho'olawe, this will be the next Mauna Kea, but bigger and stronger. Oia no, mahalo.
Mahalo nui, thank you so much. Kuhan, I believe you're up next. Kuhan, are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm going without camera today.
Okay, thank you.
Aloha, my name is Kuhan Pac-Mander. I am a resident of Hawaii Island. I oppose the extension of these leases. This land belongs to the Kanaka Maoli, the original people of these islands. This land is their bodies, their blood, their bones, their genealogy. To conduct war exercises on this land is a crime against humanity and desecration. It is said that the best way to commit a crime is to make it legal. That is what these lease extensions would achieve. I oppose the legalization, as it were, of these human rights crimes in the form of these lease extensions. These lease extensions are to accommodate a military agenda focused on war with China. It's just one manini piece of the full throttle plan to transform the vast Pacific ecosystems into ranges to train for a global war. This perverse idea that World War III is likely has justified an $800 billion weapons budget for 2022 for missiles and weapons of mass destruction, all aimed at China. It is the ultimate expression of anti-Asian hate. You have to be either a complete moron or totally brainwashed to think that our biggest threat is China. It's all too painfully clear that our biggest threat is not China. It's the climate crisis. It is the biblical scale floods sweeping away medieval villages in Europe. And in the same week, the floods in China, washing hundreds of cars across highways like so much flotsam and jetsam and drowning subway commuters. It is the fires burning whole California towns to the ground and the wildfires in Greece turning the islands into a suffocating hellscape. There is a wildfire in Siberia burning out of control right now that is larger than all the other wildfires in the world combined. In Siberia, the coldest place on the planet, hundreds of acres of crops are withering right now without water in California, the nation's breadbasket. And now the IPCC just stated just this week that we don't have a decade to save the planet like they said in 2019. We've got 18 months. So Pentagon, you've got 18 months and an $800 billion budget. What are you going to do? The Pentagon is the world's largest single emitter of greenhouse gases. the Pentagon emits more greenhouse gases than the nation of Denmark, more than Sweden, more than
I'm
Portugal.
sorry, hon. I need you to wrap it up. I have about 30 seconds.
And
Sorry.
for what? To deploy weapons of mass destruction and generate profits for the arms industry with endless military training, like at Pohakuloa, like at Kahuku, like at Makua Valley. Climate cooperation with China, not war, is the only path to a livable future. Stop the war games. No extension of state leases to US military. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kuhan. I appreciate it. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Ari, and then Tara, I see you up, but if you're okay, I'm going to have Tootie go after Ari, and I promise we'll come back to you, Tara. So Ari, and then Tootie, you're up after that. Hi, Ari, we can't hear you if you're trying to speak. You're still muted. Try again.
Aloha mai kako.
Aloha.
Aloha. I'm Ari Wasu. I'm a Honolulu resident, a diasporic Hmong woman from Thailand, and a PhD student at the University of Hawaii in Manoa. I'm speaking today in solidarity with Kanaka Maoli, who demand the end of leases, the immediate start of cleanup, and the return of land stewardship to Kanaka Maoli. By all counts, the United States and the military is illegally occupying the Kingdom of Hawaii, which was unlawfully invaded by the US Marines on January 16, 1893. This EIS is a sham. The US military is the world's largest polluter, creating 750,000 tons of toxic waste every year in the form of depleted uranium, oil, jet fuels, pesticides, defoliants, lead, and other chemicals. The US military's occupation and desecration of Hawaiian land is being used to enact violence all across the Asia-Pacific region, including my native homeland. It is misleading and deceptive to present land back as a no-action alternative, while giving all other alternatives numbers. Not retaining the leases is not enough. The US military must clean up its mess. As an Indigenous woman, I also express concern for how militarization threatens the safety of women and girls across the Pacific. Hubs for sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. If you were actually concerned about environmental impacts, you would return the land to Kanaka Maoli, clean up your mess, and deoccupy Hawaii now. For the future of the world, as the 2021 IPCC report states, we have 16 months to stop the climate crises. This necessitates a demilitarized and independent Pacific. Long live the Kingdom of Hawaii. That concludes my comments for today. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Ari. Appreciate it.
Aloha mai kako. Can you hear me? All right. Okay. My name is Mary Tuti Baker, and I grew up in Kailua and Waimanalo. My father served proudly in World War II as a Marine Corps pilot. He fell in love with my mother and her Aina and stayed in Hawaii. I want us all to remember that when land in Hawaii is used for military training, it means that Aina is being used by the occupying government to train, to kill other Black, Brown, and Indigenous people around the world. I want you to remember that despite deeply inadequate public engagement processes like this one, the US military disregards Indigenous people and their land everywhere it goes, from Hawaii to Okinawa to Guam to around the world. These will always be my deepest objections to the military in occupied Hawaii, and the impacts of that cannot be measured in any EIS. It's frustrating because this EIS is a performance. It reinforces the idea that this is the Army's decision, and it is not, or it should not be. The Army is the lessee, and these lands are held in trust for Native Hawaiians and the public. That means the people, and specifically Hawaiians, should get to decide what is being done with that land and whether it serves us. How does ravaging INA for war serve trust beneficiaries? It does not. Instead, it further entrenches us in an unhealthy dependence on the US military, the largest greenhouse gas emitter on this warming planet. A complete and honest environmental impact statement would take that dependence into account. It might also examine the way military personnel skew our housing market and price local families out of Hawaii. The reality that the military already controls nearly a quarter of all the land on Oahu, the undeniable fact that obscene levels of military spending make it impossible to fund critical social programs like education and healthcare. Even though the Army has had this land for 65 years, you are not and never were entitled to it. Retention should not be the starting point for this EIS process. We want the military to return the land as it was prior to military occupation. Mahalo nui.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Trisha. I don't think your microphone's working right now. I think we have next Darius Killa, followed by Ingrid Pedersen. Thank you, Dr. Mary Tuti Baker.
Hi, aloha. Can you folks hear me? Hello.
Go ahead, Darius.
Hi, aloha. Can you folks see me?
Yes.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm driving, but I don't want that to negate my testimony. Aloha mai kako. My name is Darius Kili Kanapuni Lelehoa Kila, and I reside from Waianaimoku. I serve on the Nanakuli Maili Neighborhood Board, but I speak as just a member and not necessary for the board entirely. I come before you folks in strong opposition for the extension of military lands on Hawaii land. For too often, my community of Waianaimoku has bared the burden of not just military, but everything throughout Hawaii and Oahu, specifically in Honolulu County. Folks back in 1970s and whatever backdoor deals to have leased the military land for $1 a year is absolutely insulting. That is reserved for Hawaiians in itself. And the fact that beneficiaries have seen nothing but benefit, no benefit from the leasing of these lands is absolutely heaven. I'd also like to comment the fact that the military was so quick to change their public input session to a Zoom session is also very appalling in itself. My community has often taken the burden in opposition against the military, and the state and the military has always not listened to my community. I am not anti-military, and I understand what you folks do, but Hawaii itself makes up the smallest part of the US, but we house 80% of the most endangered species that exist in the United States. We have constantly seen the bad effect of what you folks have done to the lands in my community. Makua itself has been bombed for as long as I've grown up, and I've watched my kupuna protest that from as long as it can. So I'd like to go on record for the work that has been done prior to me and the work that will continue to be done. I am in strong opposition against the extension of military land leases here in Waianaimoku and throughout Hawaii.
Mahalo nui. Thank you so much, Darius. Let me see the next part.
Hi, this is the interpreter. My team
Hi.
has disappeared from the screen, and so we're not able to switch. So can somebody bring her back on, please?
Okay, Anela's is missed. The other ASL interpreter is not on screen. No, it's just one. There's another woman. It's a team of people. So the other team members are missing, dropped off. Okay, so I think we have Ingrid up next. Carrie, we're going to continue to work on that and try to get the other team member, get Anela back.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being patient with us. Ingrid? I don't see her. Did she drop off?
Yeah, I think I know what the issue is.
What is the issue?
I think we can't have that many panelists. I think we've overrun our limit, so it's kicking people out.
Okay, we will figure that out. There she is.
Should I
Just-
just allow her to speak
Yes.
without being a panelist?
Yes. Thank you. I apologize, everybody. We've tried to, one of the questions we got yesterday was people weren't allowed to see each other on video. So we tried to adjust that for tonight, and it seems to be a bit of a technical challenge. So we're just going to allow people to speak. I apologize again. I know that's not what people asked for, but it seems to be that, you know, we have some limits on the technology. So Ingrid, can you hear me? Are you on?
I can hear you. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
okay, I can hear you great. Thanks so much, Ingrid. Go ahead.
Okay. So you don't want to see my beautiful wrinkled face, all 66
I'm so
years.
sorry. I was looking forward to seeing your beautiful face. I'm so
Okay.
sorry. Your
So
beautiful
I'm from
voice
the-
will have to do.
Okay. I'm from the windward side, Kailua, where I've grown up since I was a little girl. My husband's goes back generations here. And this is just a little, I'm actually on the fence as far as the military continuing operations in these areas, because I do know we have a need for a military and that they need a tropical place to train. My father was in the Navy on the East Coast during World War II. My mother-in-law witnessed the bombing of Pearl Harbor from the hills of Honolulu and went down with her mother, who was a Red Cross leader and was there for 3 days. She was only 12 years old and we'll never forget it. So my main concern that I wanted to bring up is the biological resources, the natural resources, specifically the plants and animals in these areas. Some of these areas I've actually been up in Kahuku area and up above Pupukea. I think I've actually been illegally hiking there when I was young, and they're very beautiful. I know, as Darius mentioned, that I didn't know we had 80% of the endangered species. But that makes sense because Hawaii, I know, has the most extinct species of at least of any place in the world, I believe. My friend used to be head of the Nature Conservancy when it was called the Bird Project because we had so many extinct birds. Anyway, I just am concerned about you studying the state of the species in these areas, especially the upland areas up in the forest and the higher elevations, and studying the plants and the animals and to see what state they're in now. I mean, you can't go backwards, but perhaps you'll have some sense of what, if any, damage has been done, and looking for ways to mitigate any harm, because Hawaii is a very fragile natural environment, as you know. And I learned recently from my house, State House Representative Patrick Pihana Bronco, that with climate change, and I know just from growing up here in the 60s, it's gotten much, much hotter. But from climate change with the heat, the temperatures being hotter here now, the mosquitoes are going up to higher elevations and endangering the birds in the uplands. And I'm sure there are other
I'm
effects
sorry.
of climate change. So that's it. Basically, I'm just really concerned about the biological resources and hope you'll be taking great measures to mitigate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. Thank you. Next, we have Aipohaku.
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. I'm going to speak with my camera off tonight.
Okay, thank you so much.
Tonight, I lift the voices of my kupuna, whose signatures on the Ku'e petition reminds me every day that my country is Hawai'i, and we have been under an illegal occupation since 1893. The US military is unfamiliar of what consent is and why it is important on a collective and individual level. I am testifying tonight in opposition of the extended military leases of Hawaiian lands. It is 100% not okay for the military to be desecrating any of the land they train on, but to think their impact does not extend beyond training grounds are issues I am demanding for the US military to hold themselves accountable to and for while conducting their EIS. One, the US military does not and has never had our consent to be here. Two, the military cost of living allowance and other benefits are burdens forced upon the shoulders of Native Hawaiians and non-Native Hawaiian residents. Three, the psychological war tactics taught to US soldiers is a threat to Native Hawaiian communities. Therefore, military personnel are causing violence in non-military environments. Four, as the military presence expanded in our islands, human sex trafficking has skyrocketed here in Hawaii and across the world. These 4 points that I mentioned is only the tip of the iceberg. The US military is not here to protect us. In closing, I would like to share the words of Auntie Max. Pack your ukana, which are your belongings, your opala, all the trash you created, go home and don't ever come back. Under this alternative, the Army will pack their shit up and return stolen land back to the Hawaiian Queendom, the sovereign nation of Ko Hawaii Pai Aina. Mahalo.
Very much. Next, we have Banner. Banner, I saw that you went to Lelehua last night. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. Banner, can you hear me? We're trying to. Banner, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So sorry, I saw you went last night. Sorry about that.
Okay,
I'm
can you
glad
hear
you're
me?
with us tonight. Yes, I can hear you fine. Go ahead, Banner.
Okay. Banner, founding and resident, Wahiwa Oʻahu. Talofa, Colonel Misigoi, thank you for your U.S. military service. Thank you to all men and women in uniform for your service, past and present, including spouses, children, family, and friends. As a U.S. Navy military veteran, as the son of a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, combat career in Vietnam, as the father of a Marine Corps vet, 4 combat tours before the age of 21, I fully appreciate the service and sacrifice of the Marine Corps, Air Force, Coast Guard, Go Navy, Beat Army. Thank you for these 2 minutes to deliver 10 minutes of remarks. 2 points on Hawaii land leases. 1, as apologized in law by former POTUS Bill Clinton in 1993, the U.S. Army should be asking the Kingdom of Hawaii, not the state of Hawaii, for the land lease. 2, as the Kingdom of Hawaii currently has no monarch, I'm assuming that possession is 9/10 of the law. Even if that possession is illegal, which it is in this case, the so-called Hawaii Governor David Ige and the next governors will illegally extend a lease with the U.S. Army. For environmental and political reasons, I support no action alternative and offer a supplement. No action, the lease would expire in 2029 and leased lands would not be retained. Supplement, the U.S. Army in 2029 will negotiate and sign a new land lease with the Kingdom of Hawaii. To my Kanaka Ohana, as a Samoan, your blood-to-blood cousin, Fautuatu, Olelo A'wao. Scene of the crime is your connection point, not self-determining plebiscite. La ho'i ho'i ea. Restoration of your mo'i is the answer. In the meantime, no vote, no grumble. So fua. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you so much, Banner. Thank you. Next, we have Kaipo Matsumoto, and after that, we have Mickey Weems. Kaipo?
Aloha pumihana kākou.
Aloha.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Right
Please
on.
go ahead.
Aloha kula hui. Hello to the wonderful ASL translators too. Mahalo nui. You guys are all killing it. Aloha keo. Salutations, Colonel Misigoi. My name is Kaipo Matsumoto. I'm a master's candidate in history at the University of Hawaii. I also hold a bachelor's degree in history and literature from Harvard University. I was raised in Honouliuli on the Ewa Plain, near the westernmost bay of Pu'uloa, also known as the West Loch of Pearl Harbor. I grew up not far from a place referred to as Jigoku-dan, or Hell Valley in Japanese, the largest and longest used internment camp for American citizens of Japanese descent in our islands during World War II. I invoke this indefensible historical scar for one reason, that the US military built an internment camp that should have never existed. 65-year leases for 6,300 acres for $1 should have never existed, and they should not be renewed, not in 2029 and not ever. Just to clear things up, to the military, Colonel Misigoi, land in Hawaii is an asset to Hawaiians. Aina is family, and as we all know, to the both of us, Aina is power. And that is the basis from which we reject the very premise of this scoping process, as mentioned before by so many of those who spoke. The scoping process belies the very terms of the military's lessee position. So in the spirit of lip service, let's talk story. Those that prepare for war are those that expect and look for it. And those that look for war will always find it at home. So when we drive our kids to school and they ask us why there are Humvees on our freeways, and they ask us, who are we fighting? The only answer we have to offer is that they are fighting those they purport to protect. We dream of a Hawaii where we do not have to fight to be ourselves. So we call for environmental impact statements that don't just allow the HEPA and that follow the HEPA and NEPA laws. We call for statements that take into account the very communities live fire training ostensibly protects and impacts. We call for environmental impact statements that make legible the impact of military expenditure and exercises on not only our material lives, but our affective lives, which is the life of our Aina. So I can scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, I need you to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up. Yeah, before I go, I just wanted to echo what Sister Emma Koa said yesterday. Hey, you guys better buckle up, bro. From Guahan to the Philippines to Okinawa and beyond, Oceania, bro. We here and we rising. And we rising faster than you guys can contribute to sea level rise. For those that choose, our purpose will always be alone for this Aina. Mahalo nui to all those that shared. E ola Hawaii a mauloa. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Mahalo nui, Kaipo. Mahalo. So we're going to have two Mickeys back to, oh no, we have a Mickey and a Mikey. So we're going to have Mickey Weems and then Mikey Inouye.
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Awesome. All right. When should I start?
Start now.
Okay. Aloha, my name is Mickey Weems. I'm a proud Marine from a military family that goes back to the Civil War. We fought for the Union. I want to talk to you about honor. I went to visit the ROTC Center over on the UH Manoa campus, and looking about, I was talking with the commandant there, the commander. There were all these meakawa, weapons of war there. There were all these ihe spears. There were leo mano there. There were like these handcrafted Hawaiian weapons that were given in honor to people for various services, and that apparently is a military thing. I mean, even some of the mottos over at the ROTC Center are in Hawaiian. So there's this honor superficially given to the Kanaka Maoli, and I would remind that honor is contingent upon a kuleana responsibility to respect the people from which you are deriving this mana. Okay, I see no problem with it because one of my friends is Umikai. He's a weapons master, and he probably made a lot of the weapons that you all use or given. And he has this to say. I'm going to end my thing. Just I'm reminding you about honor, and the honor is respect the wishes of the Kanaka Maoli on this, and that is to give the land back. Okay. He says this. He says the U.S. government needs to control the military's use of land and respect what it means to the natives that have cared for it for generations. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. Next, we have Mikey Inouye, and then Bronson Azama is up after that. Mikey, can you hear? Are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you good.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Aloha, my name is Mikey Noi, and I'm a resident of Makiki. I'm strongly opposed to the extension of military leases on the lands of Makua, Kahuku, and Pomoho specifically, and strongly opposed the continued illegal occupation of the U.S. military in the Hawaiian Kingdom generally. An extension of leases for the Army would only result in further desecration and destruction of Aina and further displacement of Kanaka Maoli, the rightful caretakers and descendants of this land. An extension of these leases would continue to allow the U.S. military to use these sacred abundant places to perfect their chief exports of death and destruction to other sovereign nations. The U.S. military is the greatest polluter on the planet. The U.S. military brings misery, chaos, and disorder, and engages in theft, exploitation, and resource extraction everywhere it goes. So how can we trust the U.S. military to be good stewards of the land, let alone allow them to conduct their own environmental impact statements? You are the foxes guarding the hen house. You are the arsonists keeping watch over the fire department. You are the invasives in the lo'i that need to be yanked out by the root. We all know that the idea that the U.S. Army will actually take this overwhelming public opposition seriously is about as likely as the dark side sincerely asking members of the Rebel Alliance for input on the construction of the Death Star. This is a purely performative exercise, a tick box on your PR checklist, so you can go on ignoring the true will of the people and a growing anti-imperialist decolonial movement that wants you off not just all lands in Hawaii, but all lands everywhere. This land should be covered in kalo, not shell casings. That's why we say not another 65 years, not another 8 years, not another year, period. This is not your land to lease. Land back, aloha ena, and a'ole U.S. Army. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mikey. Bronson and then Kyle Kajihiro. Bronson, can you hear? Can you unmute yourself? You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry, now I can hear you guys. It took a while, I think, for the unmuting to happen. My name is Bronson Azama. I'm a kama'aina to the Ahu He'eia and a Kanaka Maoli. I would like to state that when it comes to the alternatives that were proposed, the one I would like wasn't on there, and that's rather than land retainment, land return to the Hawaiian Kingdom, to the Crown, and to Kuleana land owners, the rightful owners of these lands. Because currently the United States, as we have stated time and time again, has no legal authority of these lands. So even this process is sort of fraudulent in a way where we should be respected in a nation-to-nation relationship, not in this sort of American processes. Going into the illegalities that started from the real illegal participation by United States Marines in the overthrow and usurping of our queen, and then followed by a fraudulent annexation that was a joint resolution, didn't go through the 2/3 ratification process. And even in case law, in a joint resolution, you need an agreement between two parties. Well, the Republic of Hawaii wasn't the legal authority to convey Hawaii to the United States. And following that in World War II, which is why this is kind of interesting, in World War II, Hawaii was added to the list, the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories. And in 1959, through Resolution 1469, the United States, to justify its illegal occupation, considered the Statehood Act and a referendum, which is contradicting because when you look at Public Law 103-150 and the Apology Resolution, in one of its whereas clauses, it states, quote, whereas the indigenous Hawaiian people never directly relinquished their claims to their inherent sovereignty as a people or over their national lands to the United States, either through their monarchy or through plebiscite or referendum. And just as recent as 3 years ago, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner published a memorandum in 2018 stating in regards to the Hawaiian Kingdom's current political status as a, quote, nation state in continuity, end quote. And with that being said, it's very telling that the United States is trying to really hold on a grip and a stronger grip of military power on our islands as there is question on the legalities in the international realm.
So, sorry, I need you to wrap it up.
Yeah, so in a wrap up, the United States has an opportunity now because history is ongoing. You have an opportunity to be honorable, something we have yet to see and something we have yet to witness. So with that being said, I would ask that the armed forces stop being used as pirates of the Pacific and we really return these lands back to the people, back to the kingdom, back to the crown, and back to the Kuleana land owners and all owners with allorio title. With that being said, ale au mamake ke noho o ko I ko ukula iwi. Mamake au ke aina hoi o ko yamako. Ko Hawaii ko au puni o Hawaii, mena li'i, mena kupa aina o ke aina. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. Kyle, and then Carrie or Kari Labrador. Kyle, can you hear me?
Aloha, can you hear me?
Aloha, and sorry, I know you went last night too, so I'm really sorry for the
No
inconvenience. I know
problem.
you were there.
So thank you
Ed.
for this opportunity. My name is Kyle Kajihiro. I live in Mo'ili'ili. I'm a lecturer at UH in ethnic studies and geography. I want to talk about scope, legal principles, and purpose and need. The scope has to consider on the temporal axis, past, present, and future. This means looking to the past for what practices existed in these lands that have been temporarily suspended but could be revived, and also has to look at the historical trauma. You've heard about the overthrow, eviction and dispossession, fires, unexploded ordnance, and the slow violence of toxins. The present, how is the dispossession or the Army's retention of these lands affecting the diaspora of Hawaiians who are connected to these places who are now orphans from their ancestral lands? How is the denial of meaningful access and cultural practices affecting the continued vitality of Hawaiian culture? Looking to the future, this is a pivot point. Will it be a future of healing and resurgence, or will it be the ongoing violence of settler colonial dispossession? On the spatial axis, the analysis must go beyond just the local sites that are being affected. Some have already testified about where are these wars that are being practiced on Hawaiian lands affecting? Who are the people that will be affected by these wars? Who are the people that have been dispersed, who have been evicted from these lands? How are they also being affected by the continued dispossession? This gets to the cumulative impacts. They have to look at total effects, direct and indirect, as well as the synergistic effects of all these actions. Legal principles. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples says that Indigenous peoples have a right of free, prior, and informed consent. And several people have spoken to this tonight. So to frame it another way, in the anti-rape slogan, no means no. When people say no, that has to be respected. And this is part of the international framework. There's a Hawaiian proverb, "He ali'i ka aina, he kaua ke kanaka." The land is chief and the human is the servant. So what rights does the land have to not be desecrated, to not be shot or bombed, to not suffer abuse? The court upheld the principle in the Pohakuloa lawsuit of malama aina. This should be a guiding principle for moving forward. And on the purpose and need.
If you can wrap it up, sorry.
Yeah, last point. What does the aina need? What does the community need to continue its practice? The military needs to repair the harm it has done to the land and community. And I just want to end with a quote from Walter Kamana, who testified in 2001. He's a kupuna from Waianae and who was evicted from Makua. He said, "I was small, used to run when the plane come in. The plane had no respect for people living in the valley. Only had one small little church. You ever seen your church get bombed on Sunday? I seen that, small boy. I seen my church get taken away by a bomb. I hope my ancestors come back outside and tell you guys, because I'm going to tell you why. Nothing can cover that you continue it more and more. You bury all water wells inside there. You bury toxic stuff there. You cover up, bury inside that place. No, come down here, use us Hawaiians. We've been taking and holding our puke. Something hurts so much, yeah? Go home with a big worry. Think about us. Sometimes we can bite back hard." So repairing the harm begins with returning the land and sovereignty. And that must be the guiding purpose for this EIS. Rename the study Army Training Land Return Environmental Impact Statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Kari, Carrie, and then after that, we have Kawila.
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Mahalo to everyone who has testified and given their mana'o and ike. It's been received and greatly appreciated. I especially want to mahalo those who have led the way and continue to fight for what is pono. My name is Carrie Leah Labrador. I am Kanaka Mai'ole. I live below KTA. I have family members that have served and continue to serve in the military. I speak on behalf of my entire ohana, past and present, as well as future. I am here today to say no to any and all lease land extensions. We say no to any revisions on any leases except for an exit plan. Pack up clean up, and get out. I am appalled at the audacity of the US military, our congressional leaders, and anyone else who continues to speak as though we are not aware that we are speaking of stolen land. Land that was stolen from the Hawaiian Kingdom and Kanaka Maoli. Land that you want to take more of. As everyone is well aware, Hawaii is the leading capital of endangered endemic species of the world. We are also the leaders of invasive species. As a Kanaka Maoli, I am an endangered species. An ever-growing US military complex, unscrupulous foreign investors, as well as foreign and domestic tourism are the invasive species that is strangling out our very existence. The US military currently occupies almost 24% of Oahu. They are the most heavily funded military on the planet in the history of man. And with this being said, they are also the biggest polluters of the world. And Hawaii has had to pay the biggest brunt of this. The native Hawaiians have also had to pay the highest cost, with our lands being taken away, poisoned, and being priced out of Hawaii. We cannot compete with the funding of the US military when it comes to housing, that you are being funded by our tax-paying money. The irony is not lost on us.
Carrie, sorry, I need you to wrap it up, please.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
The human, social, and environmental costs of militarization is exorbitant, and it disproportionately is being paid by natives and their descendants. Again, I say no to any land lease extensions, and instead have an exit plan so that you can pack up, clean up, and get out. It is not the door hitting you in the butt as you leave. That is our collective boot. We do not want you here. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui. Thank you so much, Carrie. Kawila is next.
Aloha. Aloha ia.
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you. I can hear you very well. Go ahead.
Au hea hoi o e ku'ua kumakua, e ku'o ka lepo, e lono ka lepo, e kāne o ka ehu, e kāna loa o ka hauna velu, e mai, e aia lako, e make lako i ka ehu, i ta auwai ata lepo, i ta huai o ke kai, e ho na wewe o e kāne i ta luho no, e iri mai ka aina, e kuka ini mo ke ahu vale na ki e lono i ka maki, e he e ke ola, e lako a kana loa ka hauna velu, e alu mai. I oppose this bill attempting to extend the military leases of public lands at Makua, Kahuku, Puamoho. We are tired of appealing to the morality of a state and military who continues to subjugate and degrade our land and our people. The American military's purported yearning for national security is a fallacy. How can you have national security when you stole land, forcibly evicted our people, and created a never-ending cycle of houselessness in our own homelands? The underlying question then is, are we American or not? Are we part of this purported national security plan? Are you willing to admit that Americans are the terrorists in Hawaii, Oahu, Okinawa, and the many indigenous nations in Turtle Island? We are not American. We will die as Hawaiians and live on forever as Kanaka Oiwi. We have more broken promises than broken treaties. The EIS are groping blindly for a threshold to continue to latch onto. We say lava, enough already. Here are some concepts I know you missed. Every single speck of dust and dirt is an amalgam of 7 particular Hawaiian gods. Kane, ku, kanaloa, lono, haumea, papa, vali, nu'u. Prior to ending your scope, you must document every single rain and wind name, or you haven't even begun to do land research. We have documented the land commission awards to people from the Hawaiian Kingdom. The Hawai'i Nui or water tables has changed, and it is well documented in chants, so you have to research them too. I've seen at least 47 chants online in Hawaiian language newspapers from Makua alone. There are countless others. My O'ahu kaho noa o lenei, ke ai mai nei kakoi, ka pohaku. People around the world are occupied by American forces and are eating stones, while the American military's insatiable hunger for bodies sustains imperialism and exceptionalism by which they continue to rape and kill people and land. Just because it isn't a spectacle doesn't mean my people aren't dying. We still remember that the American general who shot in the sole bullet in the Iolani Palace and killed a guardsman on January 16th, the day before the overthrow in 1893. We still remember the way that the American Navy shot at 13-year-old kids in the 1885 Wilcox Rebellion. We still remember the forced evictions in Makua and Waimanalo by the US Army. We also remember the way that we got to reestablish our ancestral relationship with Kaho'olawe and we defeated the Navy in court. We also remember the way the winds and rains carry our chants into the ringing ears of our people or the bursts of bonds. We also remember that this land, our ancestor, has a maluhia and protects us as we protect her. Okay, aloha aina ka mea ku'ua ia oe. Aloha Aina will be the demise of the American Empire. Land back. Ho'i ho'i ke ku'oko'a. Mahalo.
And then Abigail. Sorry, Summer. Sorry, we have up next, we have Summer. And then we have Abigail after that. Summer.
Aloha.
Aloha. Aloha.
Aloha,
I
you
can hear
can
you
hear
well.
me?
Go ahead, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Aloha Aina. My name is Summer Kaimalia Mullins Ibrahim. I am a lineal descendant of James Ka'iyama Helenihi of Makua. I am so exhausted by this process. It takes so much out of me each time I struggle to bring myself to the point of commenting. And worse, we all know that this is just a check off the military's to-do list. And we've been saying the same thing for decades: clean up and pack out. I'm here to reiterate the same thing tonight. Are military missions truly more important than the lands and peoples that are affected by both the training and the actual aggressions that have been implemented globally, leaving behind generations affected by birth defects from depleted uranium, communities without clean water or land which they can produce food on? Does the military truly care about their impacts? For 6 decades, you've been training in Makua, causing destruction, not only environmental, but cultural. Separating us from the lands of our ancestors is a form of genocide, cutting us at the root, leaving generations of displaced people. For much longer than 6 decades, Ohana have been separated from our iwi kupuna and the aina that fed us for generations. I can't even begin to describe the mental and emotional impact of seeing these lands of my ancestors from behind a barbed wire fence. And yes, we've been given access to this aina, but access is not enough to heal the wounds that have been left. The years of separation from iwi kupuna and from the aina of our ancestors. Our survival depends upon the life of our land, and the life of the land is perpetuated by our sovereignty. Each time I think of access, I remember when I brought my ohana to a Makua access to revisit the aina of our kupuna. And while waiting to enter, standing outside the barbed wire fence, a young army soldier is pacing inside, stops and makes a hand motion as if he's shooting us with a machine gun. This is the greeting we are given by the occupier as we stand outside the lands of our ancestors, the lands they were displaced from. And now I hear the army has photos of our ohana in Makua on display, while they continue to desecrate and rattle their bones and propose to continue to use this aina for their training. The military promotes itself to be a good steward of the lands they train on. They use our language on their signs. They throw terms around like malama aina, but I'm not fooled. I've seen the desecration at Hale'au'au and walk the aina of Lihue, where the iwi kupuna were uprooted by bulldozers. I've seen with my own eyes the pollution of natural springs and the destruction of cultural sites in Makua, and have walked the areas of Mokapu where iwi kupuna were desecrated and later found in foundations of base housing. I've walked the lands of Pohakuloa filled with unexploded ordnance, seen the environmental and cultural impacts of our food basket at Pu'uloa. We hear about the leaking military fuel tanks at Red Hill affecting our precious water resources.
I'm so sorry. I need you to wrap up, please. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
In the next phase, I want the Army to look at how COLA impacts the rental market and displaces local and Kanaka Maoli who get priced out of their homeland. I want them to look into how many service members use their COLA to purchase homes in the islands and how that impacts the housing market and homelessness of Kanaka Maoli. I want you to look into crime connected to service members in communities near US military bases around the world, including rape, murder, violence, child sex trafficking, etc. I want you to look at how your service members affect areas outside of training areas with pallet fires, off-roading, massive beach parties. Just to be clear, I fully support the no action alternative, stressing that the military absolutely needs to be held responsible for cleaning up our vai, our aina, vai and kai that have been affected by their training throughout years of abuse. Mahalo for hearing me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your very passionate testimony. Sorry to interrupt you. Abigail and then Tom.
Can you hear me?
Abigail, yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
I'm here
to say that I do not want to see any extension of leases here. I'm standing here with Kanaka Maoli as a local haole, been here since 1962, was around to see the destruction of Koho'olawe, when that land, which was usable land people lived on, was used as a bombing target and bombed so much that it broke the water table, and the land is no longer something that can be inhabited. I'm a public school teacher, have been teaching here for a long time. I hear all the time about things like tanks at Red Hill. They're leaking, but the military says, well, it's only a little leak of toxic fluids into our water table. You know, I've talked to people before who live on the continent. We're a little tiny dot on the globe if you look at us. But we have a huge military presence. Oahu especially, at any point in time, 1/3 of the population is military. That shouldn't be happening. And since the military are moving off base, now it's caused housing to go up. And I think when I look back at the history, that military presence has been here since the overthrow. Never been invited, never been wanted. And yet here we have this, as people were saying, performative meeting asking how we feel. We don't want you here. I don't mind the military, but America is a huge continent. We're not Americans. I'm an immigrant, so I can say I'm not an American either. But I've looked at all the things that have happened, and the military has never cleaned up the mess that they made.
Abigail, I'm sorry, I need you to wrap it up, please.
That's fine. I just, I'm saying no to leases, and I stand with Kanaka Maoli in asking for their land back.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We have Tom, and then we have Sorcha, Sorcha. I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And then we have several speakers still to go after that. So Tom, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you great. Go ahead, Tom.
Okay, land back, bodies back. Aloha, my name is Tom Awaniki. I'm a resident of Makiki, and I'm here in solidarity with my Kanaka comrades in firm opposition to extending the lease of more than 6,000 acres of unceded Hawaiian lands to the U.S. Army. The U.S. military has enacted violence on the Aina and its people since long before the overthrow and ongoing occupation. These lands belong in Hawaiian hands, not in the hands of its oppressors, who enact violence on the Aina and violence on women, who make the cost of living here unbearable, who leave scars and unexploded ordnance in sacred places, who leak gas and other poisons into our aquifers, among so many other atrocities. These are unceded lands, illegally occupied lands. The argument should begin and end there. This is an opportunity for healing that we should seize. Land back, Army out. Mahalo nui for your time. Aloha.
Oh, sorry. I think I was muted. Sorcha McCary. I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
Yeah, it's Sorcha McCary. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm reading a statement on behalf of my political party, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. My name is Sorcha. I'm a haole who grew up in Laie on the north shore of Oʻahu, where I attended Kuhuku High School. It wasn't until after high school that I learned of Hawai'i as center of the Pacific, and it wasn't until after that that I learned not only is Hawai'i the center of the Pacific, it's the center of US imperialism in the Pacific. From here, the US pursues its agenda of endless war and military aggression towards other colonized nations. The United States has been engaged in armed, open conflict with other countries 23 of the 25 years I have been alive, and has militarily occupied Hawai'i for over 4 times that. Hawai'i's lands and Hawai'i's people, the Kanaka Maoli, are treated as raw, extractable commodities to fuel the US war machine, which currently sends soldiers, weapons, and terror abroad to people in Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Palestine, and elsewhere, not to mention beats its war drums in anticipation of intervention in Cuba and war with China, all fueled by the occupation of Hawai'i and abuse of its people. And the US military is no stranger to using and abusing fuel as the world's largest polluter, using 21 billion liters of fuel every year, more than the total carbon emissions of Denmark. Our armed forces create 750,000 tons of toxic waste every year. The military continues to pollute here as well, as we know of what we know, that is, of depleted uranium being shot and scattered to the wind, mountains, ocean, and soil of this land, of this Aina. There is a profound entitlement with which the US military presumes to occupy these lands, resting on not only the absence of recognition of any wrong being done to the self-determining people of Hawaii, but not even affording the barest pretense of reparation for the harm acknowledged in name only by the US government when it apologized for its role in the illegal overthrow. $1 will never be enough for 65 more years of continued abuse, occupation, and export of the same on a broad international scale, self-determination and reparations for the Hawaiian people.
Are you done with your statement? Sorry, I just want to check.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next, we have Keola Kawai, Spencer Shimabukuro, and then after that, we have Vernon Wilson. Keola Kawai, can you hear me?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Go ahead.
Loha kako o Keola Kawai ki ikuewa, Genko Spencer Shimabukuro ko inoa. No wahiwa mayo. I'm a UH-LO graduate and a current master's student in linguistics at Nanzan University in Nagoya, Japan. Born and raised in Wahiwa, I was woken up and put to sleep, not by my mother, not by an alarm clock, but by the horrendous sounds of US military aircrafts blasting their engines of war, or the sounds of rapid machine weaponry at the crack of dawn and at the dead of night. Many of us have become accustomed to the idea of impending war and doom on our once peaceful islands. We've become numb to the treatment of our land as a commodity for predatory tourism and US militarism, but not anymore. It is apparent that you believe that we'll be welcoming to this prolonged treatment of our land, our ancestor. Hutiyo amounts to pennies through meaningless environmental statements. However, the only acceptable environment statement is simple: you leave us. Only by the US military leaving protects the fragile and delicate Aina that has been stripped of all cultural and spiritual value and suppressed with a military stranglehold since the US military-led overthrow in 1893. Leaving will become the starting point of healing the wounds and the generational trauma that Hawaiians have been enduring throughout the illegal US occupation of our islands. Indeed, there is no such thing as environmental militarism. There is nothing sustainable about military training fields. There is nothing forgivable to the continued misuse of native lands. Furthermore, militarism goes against the expressed wishes of Native Hawaiian self-determination and our longing to live on a land at an affordable cost. Not leaving will only bring further nuclear contamination, further bombing, further desecration of sacred lands, further removal and dispossession of native remains and native people, further delusions of American cultural superiority, and most of all, further death around the world. In closing, we have not and never have and never will consent to the further destruction of our land. Let the lease expire or leave as soon as possible. Thank you for your time, mahalo, and thank you so much to the ASL interpreters. You guys are amazing. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony. Vernon Wilson.
Hello.
Hello, I can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
My name is Vernon Wilson, born and raised in Wahiwa, and I oppose any extension of your lease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You were fast. That kind of caught me off guard. So thank you very much. Lou, you're up next. Lou, can you hear me?
Aloha ke alani.
Aloha, Lou. How are you?
Thank you. Hi. Thank you so much, Colonel. Lou Favorito, Makaha Hawaiian Civic Club. We stand in the no position. We do not want the lease renewed. We thank you so much for your service and all that you have done. Same thing, we have military in our family. Daddy's retired, so we can appreciate the work and the effort, but we would like no renewal of the lease. Thank you very much. Aloha, sis.
Mahalo, Lou. Good to hear from you always. Fabian is up next. And then we're gonna have Pete, Doctor. Fabian, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, can you
Yes,
hear me?
okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, my name is Fabienne, and I'm a Hawai'i, but I'm a permanent resident in Hawaii. I was brought up a little bit all over the place. Specifically, I spent my first 12 years in the French colonies in Asia and Africa. And later I had the distinct displeasure of looking at American soldiers in Vietnam, which I consider being more my my heart home. I totally oppose anything that would be to continue that war mentality that we're in right now, especially in America, where basically this is the largest empire ever. I believe there is something like 9,000 bases for the military around this little planet that we're very, very fast destroying. And if we continue to do the things that have not worked before, guess what? Nothing's going to change. It's the definition of insanity. And we have to stop this violence that begets violence. And it starts with enough with the military, enough with not being able to take care of people and give them good health, enough with the way we treat people that don't look like us, and enough with the disrespect for other people's cultures. And by the way, I lived many years in Tahiti. It's different there, but it's still a colony, except they are regaining their islands. And if the military stays here, it's not going to happen here. Mahalo. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Pete, you're up, and then Jason Alexander. Pete, can you hear me?
Aloha. I'm gonna keep it.
Okay, go ahead, Pete.
Okay, it's really unstable, so I'll keep it audio. Aloha, my name is Pete Doctor, residing in Moanalua, surrounded by military installations in every cardinal direction, no exaggeration. Rather than going into details of specific reasons to oppose renewing leases that others have been detailing, I would like to specifically counter arguments given in favor of renewing military occupation on public lands. We live in an international reality, and the international challenges require international collaboration and solutions. The strategy of nationalism, better known by the code words national interest, has only deepened divisions between nations and its peoples by putting self-interest before what's best for all parties. Rather than increase public safety and security, standing armies on such extended leases eventually lead to standoffs due to failure of political leadership to prioritize negotiation and conflict resolution. From what we see today, resorts in military threat intentions. We have repeatedly heard the chorus of concerns about rising influence of China within the greater Pacific region. Yet not one word of concern about the negative impacts of having an American-dominated Pacific, such as when it was turned into a battlefield by US, Japan, and other forces scrambling over colonies and supremacy that has yet to yield peace as we see today. It is not in the interest of Pacific Island peoples to position themselves between the squabbles of nations like the US with a bloody record of military interventions of historical proportions. Having lost its moral authority, the US is in no position to force itself into a position as the world's policeman, especially with its horrific domestic police record, similarly ripe with corruption and cover-up, unaccountability, and gargantuan budgets that starve other critical services for human needs. As a former US Army medic, I have spent much time downrange in such field exercises similar to the ones in Hawaii. It is that for that reason, I also oppose the carte blanche lease extensions, because I have personally witnessed the incredible waste and destruction by such exercises. If they're really concerned about saving lives, it is a no-brainer that the emphasis needs to be on diplomacy rather than militarism. One only look at the frequency of US military interventions and its epidemic of troop suicides to see the shallowness of such arguments. As for the reasons that the military is critical for economic interests, that is the reason posturing creates global tensions, because they openly admit its military expansion is for economic self-interest. On the contrary, militarism jeopardizes global security and economy. As a former soldier of generations of soldiers, the sentiment that the military is good for the economy is an insult to our service. When I hear commanders and politicians boil down that the DoD needs exclusive access to public lands for national security and to protect troop lives, what I really hear are code words asserting that America is superior to the sovereignty or well-being of other nations or municipalities, and that we will use military force abroad to protect American interests domestically. Neither argument is convincing to me, given the state of the world today, with this privileged position that has brought global instability and tensions that we see today, that the U.S. global military empire has actually helped foster, not defuse.
I need you to wrap it up. Sorry,
Okay, I'll wrap it up. It's national interest to preserve precious public lands and resources, not to poison and destroy them. It's national interest to reduce bloated military budgets and invest in diplomacy. This is not about being anti-military. That's pro-security. We see it hasn't worked in Iraq and Afghanistan, and from the testimonies tonight, we see it hasn't worked for the nation of Hawaii either. I don't want to see any lives unnecessarily lost, whether they're soldiers or civilians. We have more than enough trauma and debt of the war. We need to invest in peace. Mahalo, Kehao, and Anela. Papa.
Mahalo, mahalo, Pete. Thank you so much. Jason Alexander. Jason. Jason, we're unmuting you. Okay, Jason, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hi. Yes, I can hear you great now. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Aloha, my name is Jason Mark Alexander. I am currently a sociology PhD student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I stand in solidarity with the Kanaka Maoli that have spoken here tonight and who have not had the opportunity to come to this very short window of time in an inconveniently scheduled venue. Your presentation was pretty disgusting. As you speak towards transparency and serving the people, you glossed over any negative ramifications to the further leasing of the lands. I strongly oppose any further leasing. You frequently mentioned state-owned land many, many times during the presentation. That's probably the highest frequency word. And completely ignore the stolen nature of the land, which you are fully aware of. You privilege the essential mission of the military, which basically is to kill other people. And you want our troops to return safely. And your rank itself is one that's been created by rich white men. So the racism inherent in your position in the military presence on this island cannot be ignored. Even if you say you're defending peace and bring peace, it's not a great peace if there's no justice, and there's no justice if you continue to be here. If you don't care about what is legal and what is illegal, the effects are still that you're going to create more pain against people who have had generations of pain. And you've been listening to people who know all about this stuff that you're claiming that you are in a position to investigate. I don't believe the military can reform or do an environmentally safe practice by consulting other people and taking into account what's the best environmentally safe way to manage these lands, because you are not in a position to store those lands. The military's existence is a state monopoly on violence. Your purpose is violence.
I need you to
yes.
wrap it up, please.
So Colonel Misugoi, I speak directly to you. I don't know where everyone else in charge of this project is, but you're in a position to make change. You're responsible to communicate what you're fully aware of as you've been listening tonight. And you cannot be silent. You need to teach your soldiers and your comrades and your superiors that the military needs to stop and get out. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have Oʻahu. Yep. And then after that is going to be Seiji. Oʻahu, can you hear me?
Hi, aloha, Keho.
Hi, aloha, aloha.
Aloha,
Go
Nella,
ahead,
and
brother.
Corey, and Colonel. Hui mauko ai nai, kai vai ke po vai o kane vai, lo ihi ke ala hele o ke anai, I puka aku mai ke awala o pulo ai. Holo I nana kulima ilima kaha, lua lua le ahi ke wai nai. Ke mapune ke ala o ka mai le lauli, mai pane vai no e. Aloha mai kako, kauko huahilani, no puea mai au, this Waianae Valley, born and raised in the Waianae Muku, and I totally oppose about the extension of the lease in our beloved Makua Valley. And I'm here to stand up for those our kupuna that got displaced from Makua, and our kupuna that are still in Makua. As a member of Nakanekoa Makua, we go out every night to Makua, to Kaena State Park. to protect it from people from all over the world, including military that come over there every night to camp when you can't camp. But I'm just in opposition. And I want to say to all my people that, all our Kanaka that testified and non-Kanaka in opposition, mahalo nui, respect our existence or expect our resistance. Ahui ho, mahalo ke ao.
Oh, sorry, mahalo. I was saying mahalo. Mahalo. I think I was muted. We have Seiji Yamada up next, then Soro Neo after that. So, Seiji, can you hear me?
Hello there.
Hello. Go ahead, please.
My name is Seiji Yamada. I speak to you from Mililani in Kapai Aina, as Kekuni Blaisdell taught me to say. Seems to me, Colonel Misagoi, that you must be feeling like an embattled commander at the outpost of the empire, surrounded by angry natives, because that is what the US is, Colonel, an empire. Japanese people know what it means to be imperialist because in the first half of the 20th century, the Japanese took over much of Asia and the Pacific, killing, raping, and subjugating other people. When I visit much of Asia, the people want to be sure that I know that history. My understanding of the Japanese empire grinds the lenses by which I can see the US empire. It ended badly for the Japanese. We just commemorated 76 years since the atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I was born in Hiroshima. As we walked around town, my grandfather showed me the shadow of a man burned into granite. He told me that the Japanese are for peace because they know the stupidity of war. As racist as the Japanese empire was, the firebombing of all the cities in Japan is evidence that for the US empire, the Japanese were vermin, subhumans, to be incinerated as efficiently as possible. As Gil Scott-Heron said, peace is not the absence of war, it is the absence of the rules of war and the threats of war and the preparation for war. The US military is using Hawaii to prepare for a war. The Star Advertiser always has stories on how the US is preparing for war with China or Russia or both at the same time. What madness is this? The doomsday clock is no longer counting down minute by minute. We are now down to 100 seconds to midnight. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released its most recent report on August 7th. It tells us that the world is on fire. We don't need bombs and missiles and Death Stars to set the world aflame. The world is on fire already. What we need now is to work out how to get rid of.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
What we need now is to work out how to get rid of nuclear weapons, how to stop burning fossil fuel, how to develop green technology all over the world. Other than the Kanaka Maoli, the rest of us are here as guests. No one wants guests that threaten to kill people. It is time for the US military to stop occupying Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We have So for Neo next. I'm so sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Can you hear me? Are you still there? So for Neil?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'm a Pearl Harbor survivor. I was in a family that had to evacuate from Fort Kamehameha through Hickam during that bombing. I joined the Army, served 20 years, then 35 years with the Federal Service. I witnessed and experienced the Korean War, flew helicopters in Vietnam, and working in Europe, I was involved in supporting Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Kosovo, Chernobyl. All of these events were wars. and they were destructive, and they were killing people. I am definitely opposed to continuing any effort to conduct an EIS. We need to stop this nonsense. Hawaii belongs to the world. I experienced the first Pearl Harbor. If you continue to occupy Hawaii, you are preparing us for the next Pearl Harbor. And I don't live there in Hawaii anymore because I don't want to experience the second Pearl Harbor. So it's best that you pack up and leave. You have 7 years to clean it up before the leases expire. As a kupuna, I speak for those who are unable to participate in this event. There are many, many kupunas and elder Hawaiians out there who are unable to participate for a number of reasons. So I speak for them. Their voices need to be heard. Thank you so much for this opportunity to hear my voice. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your testimony. We have Arcelita next, Imasa. And then after that, we're going to have Lauren.
Hi.
Hi,
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is RC Imasa. I'm a resident of Oʻahu and a physician in training. But I would like to testify by giving the statement of my organization, the Hawaii Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines. I will now read our statement. We are Hawaii-based advocates for Philippine human rights, and we oppose the proposal for the continued leasing of Hawaii lands to the U.S. Army. We should not allow the U.S. military's continued occupation of Hawaiian lands. We stand with the Kanaka Maoris and their allies' position that the use of the land, the seas, and the air by the U.S. military represent a military occupation and an encroachment of their sovereign rights to determine how the land, the seas, and the air are used. We believe that the U.S. military's presence in Hawaii and the Pacific does not create peace, but rather ensures militarization that only leads to military occupation, international tension, and war. Through its bases, Hawaii serves as the command center of the U.S. military domination of nearly half the planet. We Filipinos know very well the violence and injustices brought about by the U.S. military. The U.S. military's presence in the Philippines leads to gross violations of Filipino people's rights. An example is the repression of the Moro people in Mindanao and aerial bombings of their communities with logistical support from the U.S. military. The Lumads and the rural indigenous communities of Mindanao are also subjected to US-funded Philippine military operations, displacing them from their communities to make way for multinational corporations for mining and large agribusinesses. But most importantly, the history of US intervention in the Philippines is more than military presence and control, but essentially insidious economic intervention 1896 to its neo-colonial dominance in the present. The policies being dictated by the US have long been repressing the Philippines' local agriculture and national industries, resulting in poverty, cultural degradation, and destruction of our environment and natural resources. We, as human rights advocates here in Hawaii, take the stand for the collective rights of the Hawaiian people, their right to peace, their right to a healthy environment, their right to self-determination, and their right to genuine development. We should heed the voice of the people and not allow Hawaii lands to be used by the US war machine further at the expense of the Hawaiian people if we would like to achieve genuine peace and justice. That is the statement.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm gonna wrap up. That is the statement of the Hawaii Committee for Human Rights in the Philippines. And to our allies and friends opposing this continued occupation of Hawaiian lands, makibaka, wag matakot. Onward with the struggle. We are with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next, we have Lauren, and then we're going to have Julia.
Aloha.
Yes. Lauren, can you hear?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
Okay. Aloha, my name is Lauren Bayaceros Watanabe. I am a resident of Makiki, Oʻahu. I am a third generation working class Mexican American. I'm a mother of a young daughter. I'm also an artist and community organizer of the Sierra Club of Hawaii, and here in solidarity to oppose the lease extension. And I would just like to actually just offer a poem because I think there's been a lot of incredible testimony, and I best express myself this way because I think this is about something much larger that you are hearing than just about a lease. So yeah. We are being buried by chaos as we speak, and these seeds traveled foreign seas centuries ago. Not every legacy is made the same. You, me, him, her, they, them, all have a story to tell. Life is a twisted game when you're a descendant of a mother, land conquered by forced entry, stripped of her dignity to profit another. She was maimed, tamed in the name of victory without consent. On that day, goddesses wailed, the winds howled as my mothers were forced to bow on their hands and knees, birth unwanted seeds on trails of tears silenced by our forefathers that labeled her his property. But through their cries, they prophesied. False kings create false gods to hide. They keep us divided, fighting a hell within ourselves. The truth is, it's just a matter of time till we rise again. This is where my story begins. We were raised to put one hand over our heart every day, thoroughbred patriots pledging our allegiance away to a country that internally feeds off of a you versus me mentality. But internationally, we are supposed to be devoted to a one nation under God identity, never doubting an unquestionable quest to exert our power through a militarized industrial complex that doesn't distinguish between child and terrorist, bombing schools, gunning down villages of civilians like you and me, all in the name of security. Does that make any sense? Nothing we do changes the pains of the past, but in this moment, we are confronting it like the rising seeds, doing our best, each in our own way, to uproot those weeds suffocating us all. So with my testimony, I just wanted to offer and expand on what has been said today, that we are also in this code red for humanity to take action on climate change and to protect our natural resources. And so having the further violence and desecration and treating land and people as disposable for military training is not acceptable, never was, and it has no place anymore. So I hope we really hear this call that it needs to end. And so on that, I will just leave. I think there's been incredible testimony tonight. So strongly opposing that extension.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you. That was a wonderful poem. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next, I think we have Julia Kramer. Julia, can you hear? And then after Julia, we're gonna have
Can you hear me?
J-Rick. Yes, I can hear you, Julia. Go ahead, please.
Hi. So mostly tonight I came here to learn, and I am really thankful for all the wonderful testimony that was given, because I think I learned a lot and I heard a lot of really interesting and awesome things. And I am going to submit my testimony in writing, but I had a couple of questions that I was hoping I could get answered. So first off, is it possible to get the slides and a full recording of this session? Will that be publicly available?
So sorry, Julia, we can't really answer questions, but I do think it's being put up live. And we can check on that and add it to the website later. But I think it is being available on YouTube. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. Can I just ask them for the record, I guess, even if you can't be there?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so I just was curious, who evaluates the EIS after it's written, and when/if it would be publicly available in its full context? And if you can't answer, I understand. And then finally, what state office actually renews the lease? Like, who has jurisdiction over that lease? What particular part of the state of Hawaii owns that land or can make decisions?
I'm super sorry. We can't answer the questions, but I would encourage you to read the EISPN and the notice of intent. I think a lot of the questions you're asking are available through that.
Okay, thank you. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have J-Rick Maderos Garcia.
Hello, Kel. Can you hear me?
Aloha. Yes, I can hear you fine. Thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
First and foremost, mahalo to everybody that is in opposition to this situation. My name is J-Rick Medeiros Garcia. I am from Mokuokeawe on the Big Island. I stand in opposition to this extension of lease for the U.S. military. It's kind of a touchy situation to a lot of people, but more so, you know, America know that they're illegally occupying our lands. They illegally seized it. You know, President Clinton signed the apology letter, and you know, it just mind boggles me to know that if I was to have something, if I did something and it said illegal, you know, like how it's illegal occupation, I would be standing in front of court and probably thrown in jail. Why isn't anything happening to the US military? The amount they pay and what they do, man, we just lost acreage here on the Big Island. And they're right there on Hawaiian homelands. Never offered nothing, no help. Right there. They could have helped us with that fire, save the lands and all that stuff. You know, it's sad to see what's going on. And I know it's frustrating for a lot, especially our kupuna that can't participate in this, or our kupuna that just can't speak in front of people. This has got to stop already. I mean, I'm pretty sure America can go and hijack somewhere else. Already we've been held hostage for how long? You know, let it go already. Now they're showing more presence on the Big Island. And great. We don't need that. We really don't need it. Now they're trying to take over our Mauna. We all know TMT is for the military. It's not no, they just gotta leave. I'm in opposition. Mahalo for you guys setting all this up. Mahalo very much. Thank
Mahalo
you.
nui. Mahalo. Thank you so much for your comments.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sheila and then Adele. Sheila, can you hear
Hi,
me?
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Go ahead.
Aloha.
Aloha.
My name is Sheila Gage. I'm born and raised in Oʻahu, surrounded by military bases. Since I was a kid, I've watched Schofield. I've listened to all the helicopters. I've listened to all the bombings, which is next door, which is East Range to me. My grandchildren are now listening to it. And I witness fires continuously on Schofield Barracks, going further and further up the mountain. I totally oppose this land lease. And I appreciate everybody coming and testifying. And I thank everybody. And I just, that's all I really want to say. I really just don't want to see anymore. Thank you.
Aloha. My name is Adele Balderston. I'm a settler, but I grew up here on Oʻahu between Kailua and Kaneʻohe. And I oppose the extension of this lease and the ongoing US military occupation of Hawaii. I used to catch the bus across the street from the Marine base going to school, where as an adolescent, I experienced catcalls, intimidation, abuse, and even assault from service members on the street or riding the bus almost daily. For me, this experience has become emblematic of the US military's treatment of Hawaii and its people. The US Armed Forces have never been good stewards of this Aina. Consider the irrevocable damage wrought by the US Navy on Kaho'olawe that rendered the island uninhabitable, while unexploded ordnance poses ongoing health and safety risks to residents of every island, And 80-year-old fuel tanks in Red Hill threaten one of Oahu's major sources of drinking water. Today, 28,000 Kanaka Maoli are currently on the wait list for the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and 15,000 Hawaii residents are currently houseless, with thousands more at risk of losing their homes, all while our state struggles to distribute rental assistance and process unemployment claims filed over a year ago. With so many Kanaka Iwi priced out of their homes every day, it would be unconscionable for the Army to retain control of a single one of the 6,300 acres leased against the people's will for an insulting $1 tithe. Hasn't the US military abused this place enough? The Army does not know the meaning of Aloha Aina, and their continued occupation of this land is a threat to Hawaii's natural and cultural environment. Give these lands back to Hawaii's people. Mahalo.
Aloha.
Sorry, okay, apparently I was muted. So sorry, I was said is we're gonna go to people
You're on mute.
went
Hello?
yesterday. I'm still muted? Am I unmuted? Okay, I should be unmuted now. Tara, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And I just want to
Okay,
say,
thank you.
mahalo e ke hao. I looked up and I see, what you stand for, and I just give you credit for being in the position you're now. Okay, so I have three things that, I want to say. Let's see. Regarding the EPA, United States Environmental Protection Agency, how it relates, and the court, Hawaii Supreme Court ruling, and Army values. So I'm going to go ahead right into it right now. So on the actual page, it says, from the environment of military munitions and federal facilities. A quick summary: to safeguard human health and the environment, EPA and the Department of Defense must address the contamination legacy left by military munitions and explosives of concern. Munitions, MEC, are unexploded ordnance and other hazardous munitions materials left behind from military live fire training or testing, open burning and open detonation, and munitions treatment, destruction, and burial activities. According to a December 2003 Government Accountability Office report, DoD suspects or acknowledges contamination by military munitions of an estimated 50 million acres of land. DoD estimates cleanup of these sites will cost from $8 billion to $35 billion. DoD transferred control of millions of acres of land used for manufacturing munitions to non-federal entities or other federal agencies for use for purposes other than the original intent. Most of these properties are now formally used defense sites. The actual and potential human health and environmental effects of exposure to MEC or munitions constituents can vary from localized to widespread. Besides the obvious danger of exploding unexploded ordnance, harm can also result when humans and the environment are exposed to chemical warfare agents or other hazardous substances used in munitions. Contamination of soil and groundwater is the big concern. So everything you have in your EIS, everything that you presented on that last page of concern, it is on the EPA website. And in August 23rd, 2019, the Hawaii Supreme Court rules state breach trust duties at Pohakuloa training area. This was fought in a 5-0 vote, overwhelming vote, that the state hasn't properly managed ceded lands at Pohakuloa leased to the Army for military training. And this was a case filed by Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation on behalf of Clarence Ching, Uncle Ku Ching, and Auntie Maxine Kaha'ulelio, two Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners. Yeah, they found that you have not done your job of cleaning up. And this last thing is, I will go into that more, but my little one wants to speak too. The Army values, I have your page open. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. So, Colonel Misagoy, the last statement you gave after yesterday's meeting, you were like, I appreciate that you see me as a human. I understand the relationships I have, with you all here. However, we're going to continue with this EIS. This is overwhelmingly 100% against renewing of these leases, no action taken, 8 years to clean up and to leave. And again,
going into this, integrity. Do what's right. This is from the Army website. Do what's right legally and morally. Integrity is a quality you develop by adhering to moral principles. It requires that you do and say nothing that deceives others, which is what is happening right now. As your integrity grows, so does the trust others place in you. There is no trust. The more choices you make based on integrity, the more this highly prized value will affect your relationships with family and friends. And finally, the fundamental acceptance of yourself. So really think about, I also looked online, the hierarchy where you are at colonel and there's about maybe 5 levels above you. Is it worth it? Is this the life you want to live? You're causing trauma, you're causing contamination, and this is ongoing for generations. You've heard it. And lastly, I want my little, go ahead.
No, leave, clean up, please leave.
Yeah, so you heard him. No lease, clean up, please leave. A 7-year-old. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Tara, and thank you again for coming tonight and waiting till everybody who hadn't spoke yet. I appreciate your patience.
Yeah.
We
Mahalo.
actually just had Councilwoman Tsuneyoshi put her hand up. So Uncle Thomas, if you can be patient a little bit longer, let's have Councilwoman Tsuneyoshi speak. Councilwoman.
Aloha and good evening.
Good evening. Aloha.
I wanted to wait until everybody had a chance to speak for the first time, so thank you so much for the opportunity to share a few words. I will also be submitting written testimony, but I wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's put this opportunity together, and most importantly, to thank everybody who has taken their time to present and offer their opinion, testimony, and very important comments on this very important issue. Colonel Misakoi, I wanted to very directly speak to you this evening as an elected official of the representing the people that you have heard from this evening, that you do take into extreme consideration the fact that all that you've heard from this evening, all of them are opposed to the continuation of the lease. I, as you, have an obligation to listen to the people in the decisions that we are making moving forward. And I just wanted to highlight the fact again that every single one of the individuals who spoke this evening were in opposition, strong opposition at that. My background is my mom's part Native Hawaiian and my father came here with the Navy. So I am within myself have the push and pull of the military and what has happened to our land. And I ask that you consider one thing as you move forward. And again, I'll put a lot of my comments into my written testimony, but that you have an opportunity, a lifelong opportunity that will not only be for now, but for generations to come, to make this very important pivotal decision to do what's right, not because you go through a process that people are unsure of whether what's going to happen, but because you make the right decision and be the voice for what you've heard tonight. And that without any further comment and with any further need for you to hear any more, that you decide to return the lands back to the people, that you decide on your own to do what's right and to be the voice for the people, because you can be that pivotal point at this time. I just want to finally close by saying from one of the veterans who was also a kapuna that he said you have 7 years to clean up before the lease is expire. And that really is what the people are calling for now. And you can do what's right and make a historic decision to return the land, and you have the opportunity to do that. I've worked with you on many other things, and I see in your eyes, and I really appreciate you being here this whole time, that you understand the importance of this time. So thank you again to everybody who has been on, that has shared from their heart about what is happening with this land. I also grew up in Wahiwa. I just want to very briefly, I know that 2 minutes are coming to an end, just to say that let's also keep in mind that these acreage that is being asked to return is very minimal compared to the overall usage of the military in Hawaii. This doesn't include all the other lands that you currently have. It doesn't include the bases, the housing, East Range in Wahiwa, which was just talked about as well. So many thousands of additional acres. So this would be a small way to say we understand and we're giving back and we're cleaning up and we're being partners as we've always said we would and we should. So thank you again to everybody who's been on tonight. I will be sending my full written comments, but thank you for everybody who's participated. Thank you for Group 70 for setting this up. Thank you, Trisha, for being here. And Colonel Misakoi, I hope that you really take this into consideration. Thank you, mahalo and aloha.
Mahalo, thank you so much, Councilwoman. And thank you for letting everybody else go first. That was very kind of you. So we have Manny, who's also put his hand up. Manny, we're letting you in. Manny, can you hear me, brother?
Aloha, can you hear me?
Aloha, I can hear you great. Go ahead, Manny. And, I know you were there last night, so again, I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. I'm very
Don't
sorry.
need to apologize. To Colonel, Sir, aloha. My name's Manuel Wayne Makahiapo Di Costa Kuloloyo. The last letter of Kuloloyo should have been an A, Kuloloi'a. The Sea of Kuloloya is now known as Honolulu Harbor. I was there last night, Colonel, with your two PAO officers. I was there, Kehao, Lelehua Golf Course. I was the second guy there, by the way. I asked your PAOs if they can put in a phone connection tonight for me, one that still does not own a personal computer for reasons I will not share with you. But Kehao, you tell Kavika McCabe at G70 if he's still there. Everybody who's being a consultant for this project is having it easy. I would love to see their face, yeah, Kehao, in a public setting. I look into their eyes. I see it in the owl. Colonel, I have been to every range in the state of Hawaii. Space, airspace, underwater, surface, with the exception of Makua Valley. The Japanese bombed Hawaii. My dad was born October 23rd, 1940. At a time we had to wear gas masks. My grandpa converted his imu into a bomb shelter. Martial law. The bombing of Kaho'olawe got stopped on October 22nd, 1990 by George Herbert Walker Bush on my birthday. My dad became the lead of water safety for the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana after the murder, disappearance, or assassination of our brothers, James Kimo Mitchell and George Jarrett Helm. I was part of the cleanup, sir, of Kaho'olawe Island. Kehao, you tell Kavika, I said, you do me one study of any U.S. Armed Forces range in the world that we control, that they have ever cleaned that up satisfactorily. I make that challenge to you guys, Colonel, okay? That's why we took Kaho'olawe back as is. It'll never happen again, Kehao. And even if we want to clean it up, the people will say, well, we need some funding. So unless Senator Schatz, Senator Hirono, Congressman Case, or Congressman Kahele can get billions of dollars to clean this place up, it'll never happen. That's why my heart is sore. Colonel, thank you, U.S. Army, for honoring my dad on July 24th in Makena, Maui at A'awa Bay, our ancestral home, when the U.S. Army brought two individuals carrying a U.S. Army flag, playing taps, honoring him, a veteran who went to Augusta, Georgia, went to use the white bathroom, and they say, hey, boy, get out of this bathroom. He went into the black one. The guy said, hey, boy, get out of this one. Kehao, he was confused. Yeah, Kehao. That's what our Hawaiian men went through. Sir, I applaud your efforts. And Kehao, in closing, I need your help, Colonel. I'm going to call you with Mr. Black and Miss Bugala. We're going to go see Uncle Tomlinchenko. I heard they're still bombing Lehue. That cannot happen, okay, Kehao? That cannot happen under my watch. I was sent to Vieques to stop the bombing for Kauka. And Senator Inouye said, do not go. So, Colonel, I salute you. I will come see you soon, okay? Kehao, thank you.
Mahalo, Manny. Mahalo.
Mahalo, ahui ho.
Mahalo. Okay, so we're gonna have Uncle Thomas Shirai. Thank you so much for waiting.
I understand because everybody.
Oh, hi. Sorry, you're a little soft.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, a little bit better if you can. I think.
I was too far away from the computer, so
Oh, okay. I can hear you better now. So please go ahead. Thank you
I
so much for
understood.
waiting.
I understood very much. Let everybody speak because they never had one chance yesterday. So I'm glad that they had a chance to say something. All I'm gonna do is just recap a little bit. I'm trying to make it as brief as possible. I'm gonna talk about a specific training area regarding this. Yes, I am a decorated Coast Guardsman, a very decorated one for first responder search and rescue. You can go to uscg.mil. I'm one of 270 recipients of the Coast Guard Medal, which is in the same category as a Silver Star and all those other high ranking awards. It's the number 11 ranking medal. Okay, I have to say this. My family was one that originated where the Dillingham Airfield is situated. It's Oʻahu called Kauai Hapai. And in 1940, during World War II, executive order took the land away. Not only there, but many places. And they had less than a month to start life all over from scratch. And some made it, some didn't. My family did, and that's the house I still reside because my grandparents worked hard and did what they had to do. Okay. After World War II, that was supposed to revert back to those landowners, like at Makua and Kauai Hapai, where my family from. But instead, what happened was they were very racially prejudiced at that time. People like the Morgan Ranch got non-Hawaiians, Howleys, that had land on military installations that they made, were given back their lands, while the Hawaiian people, it was given to the territory of Hawaii, and then later state of Hawaii, and then it became recreational use. Whereas my grandfather and his predecessors, that was all prime agriculture land. And so also, I have mixed feelings because I served in the Coast Guard and I didn't know nothing until after I graduated from high school and came back to Hawaii. The biggest gripe I have to be in solidarity is there needs to be a fairness. $1 for 65 years is not right at all. You know, this also applies to the telescopes on Mauna Kea. You know, that's already, you lit the fuse to all of us getting very and extremely angry. I want to talk about now Kauai Loa training area. In the 1940s, they had pillboxes going around the island as a shore defense. One of those shore defense was at Kauai Loa, and it was at a very important heiau, site number 240, documented in Sites of Oʻahu by the Bishop Museum, Kahoku Velu Velu Heiau. It is a navigation heiau and multi-purpose heiau, and they built a pillbox right upon that because they thought was a pile of rocks. And I just joined that out. It's documented. It's in Pana Oʻahu by Jan Beckett. There's a picture of it. But I'm sure that the military since the 1940s have improved on that sort of aspect. So that's what I wanted to share about a specific area. And also, please, Colonel, because I serve on a neighborhood board, Watchtower neighborhood board, lots of bonfires at Army Beach, Kauai Hapai Army Beach by the airfield. You know, tell them they need to leave their baggage at home when they come to Hawaii. We understand and appreciate the serving, but please, you know, that is not right at all. And it gets brought up time and time again at the neighborhood board. So that's what I wanted to share. Aloha to Jeff, aloha to you, Trish. Good to see you again. And also tell Kavika get well if he's not feeling well. Okay, mahalo, good night.
Mahalo, mahalo, thank you so much. We had banners, sorry, we have 2 hands go up who hadn't, we have 3 hands that went up that haven't spoke yet. So it's gonna be Haley and then Leslie, and then Jim, and then we'll come back to banner if no other new hands go up. So Haley Hakoba, Haley, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm Hili Hakoba from Ko'olaupoko of Oahu, and I oppose the extension of the leases as it would mean further desecration and mismanagement of Aina and cultural sites, further displacement of Kanaka Maoli, and supporting the continued U.S.'s illegal occupation of the Hawaiian Kingdom's Aina. The military needs to clean up and deoccupy our Aina. Mahalo to everyone who expressed their opposition tonight.
Mahalo nui, thank you so much. Okay, we have Leslie Gabrielle. Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
go ahead. Yes, I can hear you great. Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I am here today in solidarity opposing the proposed extension of land leases. An environmental impact statement is an evaluative tool utilized when a proposed action is determined to significantly affect the quality of the environment. Many testifiers today already indicated the significant adverse impact of the proposed land lease extension. I'm here simply to echo those statements. Hawaii is one of the most densely militarized regions. The military controls more than 205,000 acres, or roughly 5% of the land. On this island, the most densely populated, the military controls more than 85,000 acres, which is more than 22% of all the land. The environmental impacts include destruction of protected species and ecosystems, as well as contamination by explosives, fuels, solvents, chemical weapons, heavy metals, radioactive substances, and unexploded ordnances. Agriculture lands and cultural sites are destroyed, and as a consequence, farming, fishing, hunting, gathering, and worshiping have been irreparably harmed or completely wiped out in certain areas. Pearl Harbor was once one of the most productive aquaculture systems in Hawaii. Over 36 fish ponds were destroyed to build Pearl Harbor Naval Station, which today is one of the most contaminated military sites. And in 2019, the US military dumped over 630,000 pounds of nitrate compounds into the oceans off this island. The extension of land leases continues desecration of the Aina. The continued military occupation continues to perpetuate displacement of Native Hawaiian people. The dollar price tag is an insult when so many are without stable housing, with the great majority of those being Native Hawaiian. The military is inherently violent and is violently entitled to land that was never ceded. It is time to clean up and pack out. I support the no action alternative and oppose the extension of the land leases. Mahalo.
Mahalo, thank you so much for your testimony. We have Jim and then Beauty by Shay. So that's another one who hasn't spoken yet. So Jim, can you hear me?
Yes, aloha, can you hear me?
Aloha, yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much, Jim. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm calling in from the Big Island, from O'ahu area. And our main focus, of course, is Pohakuloa here, but I wanted to express solidarity with all the folks who have testified, eloquent testimony this evening about no military lease extensions, and stand in solidarity with Hawaiian lands going back to Hawaiian hands, and stop the killing of our Aina. I just want to make one point here. Our organization, Malu Aina, has documented 57 present and former military sites on Hawaii Island alone, totaling more than 250,000 acres that are in need of military cleanup. The estimated cleanup cost is in the billions or tens of billions of dollars. And I am the co-author of the book, The Dark Side of Paradise, about the military presence in Hawaii. And it documents many of the impacts of life under the gun of US militarism throughout Hawaii. The one point I want to emphasize is of one of those 57 sites on Hawaii Island
is in the Oʻahu forest, not very far from where I live and have been an organic farmer for over 40 years. It's on the Steinbach Highway, and the forest is the watershed for Hilo. And in the 1960s, the Army got a lease of state land in that Oʻahu forest area to do what they told the state was weather testing. Well, they lied. They tested chemical biological weapons in the Hilo watershed, one including sarin nerve gas. 1/50th of a drop kills you. Hunters in the area say there's still areas in that forest where nothing grows today, more than 60, 70 years later. So that's the horrors of militarism. Thanks to Patsy Mink, the congresswoman who exposed that lie of military chemical biological weapons. The mayor at the time, Shinichi Kimura, spoke up and said, cancel the lease. The military lied to us. And everybody pushed back and the military lease was canceled. And we need the same today. And tonight's testimony has been in that direction. No more lease extensions. It's time for cleanup, not further military buildup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. We have Beauty by Shay, then Dr. Keone Dudley, then Kotaro. Our hands that people have not spoken yet. So
hello, can you
hi.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead,
Okay,
please.
great. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for everyone's testimony. My name is Chesri Kapilva Nui Nui. I am a Hawaiian descent and a lineal descendant of the chief of Kauai. I am opposing the lease extension to the military, and I don't think that we should. I don't think the leases should be extended again due to the fact that we have so many Native Hawaiians that don't have homes. We have a lot of pollution from the military, and we would just like if we could get all that cleaned up. And like the desecration of our land from the military has been very terrible. We have the most military installations here on our Aina, and like for myself, I pay $4,100 rent. So for the fact that you guys get leased land for $1 is such an insult to me. I work so hard to live here on my own land that I am just like lineal descendants from past the 1700s. Like we all take care of our Aina, and you guys don't show that you guys care about the people. You guys don't care about the water. You don't care about the land. And I just oppose any kind of lease extension to the military. We need to take care of our own people. Our people here are suffering, and we can't go back to the continental United States. That is not where we're from. We are from Hawaii. All we want to do is grow our own food and take care of the land and the water, because that's what's important. And so, yes, I oppose the lease extension. And I hope that you guys can find it in your heart to like really look at the problem that we have here in Hawaii and what we can do together to fix it, because we have so much displaced Hawaiians, and the dollar leasing to you guys is like, I cannot even believe that the fake state has leased out these lands to the military, and you guys just keep polluting, bombing, desecrating, and and you guys just like don't care. So I oppose. I hope that you guys can find it in your heart to make a difference so that we can make things better here for our people. And yeah, so thank you for listening to my testimony. I hope that we can come to common grounds, and so we can fix all this that has been messing up our land here. So you guys have a great night. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cesare. Thank you very much. So we have a couple more speakers. So Dr. Keone Dudley, we're going to unmute you. Keone, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay. I am a non-Hawaiian, but I've been very involved in the sovereignty movement for 40 years. I am the co-author of A Call for Hawaiian Sovereignty, a book that was published back in 1990. I just want to say that I support everything that people have been saying as a non-Hawaiian. And I want to also say that I don't think that any negotiations of land should be going on with the fake state. All discussion of these lands should be with the Hawaiian people. We remember that Kaho'olawe was returned to the Hawaiian people. It's waiting for some kind of nation to be formed. I believe that will come about in the next year myself. I really think that we ought to be bringing at least OHA into these discussions as the body that discussions go on with. I think that any money that finally is paid for these leases should go to the Hawaiian people directly. And I think that there's just no question about that. So I just wanted to make that point tonight, that the discussion should be going on with the Hawaiian people and not with the state of Hawaii. And I thank you very much. I know what it's like to go through sitting and listening to all these things that are opposition. And I thank you, Colonel, for your time and effort to do this. Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we have Kotaro. Kotaro, can you hear? Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
You're a little soft. Can you possibly get closer to the mic?
Can you hear now?
That's a little better. The ASL interpreter, can you hear okay?
I can speak louder. Aloha kako. Aloha kako. My name is Kotaro Yuji. I'm international graduate student at UH Law. I am from the illegally occupied island of Okinawa. So as a native Okinawan, I know that any military doesn't protect the people. They only want the land as territory. In my island, drinking water is contaminated. One of the most beautiful oceans in the world, Senoko, is now being landfilled for a new U.S. Marine base. And many U.S. soldiers commit crimes and get away from being arrested, and many more destructive impacts on us. So I know how Kanaka Maoli feel about their land being taken away. So yeah, please, before you talk military narrative or justification, please respect and listen to Native people's voice. So as a Native Okinawan, I oppose to this renewal of land lease. Mahalo and aloha.
Mahalo nui. Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay. Last but never least, Banner, if you want to speak again, I can give you a couple more minutes. Banner, did you want to speak again?
Yes, Banner Fanene for the record again, mahalo. I listened to about an hour last night, so I apologize if my second opportunity to speak tonight is repetitive. While the emotion is moving, I see that half of the emotion is misplaced. If you need someone to hate, then share the hate to Governor Ige and or the governor that will have this lease extension placed on his desk. The courage needed today in Hawaii is for all you 300,000 eligible voters who are not registered to vote, for you to register and vote, and for you other 50% of registered voters who don't vote to vote. Otherwise, we will end up with another governor who will sign another $1 lease with the U.S. military. To my Kanaka Ohana, as a Samoan, your blood-to-blood cousin, I offer two. Fautuhatu, Olelo Aoao. One, elect a governor who will not sign an extension. And again, two, La Ho'iho'i'ea, restore your mo'i so that the land, this 6,300 acres, can be returned to the Kingdom of Hawaii. In the meantime, no vote, no grumble. Soifua, thank you and God bless.
Thank you so much, Banner. Thank you. So I think I turn it back over to Jeff now. Is that what I do now? Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you so much for your patience, especially with our technical difficulties. So thank you, everyone.
Mahalo, Trish, for facilitating our comment session, and thank you, everyone, for your input this evening. We've had a lot of good input. At this point, we want to again remind you that we have until September 1st for your comments to be received for the sent out by September 1st, and they will be used for our scoping input for the draft environmental impact statement. And again, we're really at the beginning of the process. All the analysis is just getting started here, and we will use your input to help shape the studies as they go forward. We have many months ahead of work. There will be meetings again when we get to the draft environmental impact statement published. And so we really appreciate your input tonight. At this point,
I saw a couple of hands go up. We
Okay.
still have a little bit of time. Is that okay? Is that okay with everybody? And one
That's
person
fine.
hadn't spoken. Okay, sorry. You might not have to do it again. Let's do Tina, who hasn't spoken yet in either night, I believe. I don't think she spoke last night. And then Manny, you're gonna close us out tonight. I see your hand up again. Tina? Tina, can you hear me? Tina?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Sorry, my mic wasn't working. I actually did testify last night, so thanks for that opportunity. But I just wanted to, I guess I can't ask a question, but I wanted to ask if these videos would stay up on your YouTube channel permanently, because they're just so powerful and such a valuable resource for our community. And just want to urge you not to take them down so that we can access them. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tina. Okay, Manny, you're gonna close us out tonight. Manny, can you hear me again, brother?
Aloha, sister. Can you hear me?
Aloha, I can hear you, brother. Okay, go ahead, Manny.
So, Colonel, sir, your staff was kind and gracious to allow me to phone in, and I did, but I wasn't able to testify. So, as an ethics officer for my company, I decided, Kehao, I'm not going to use my company computer on the Zoom, okay, Kehao? So I'm using my iPhone. In order to testify, I had to pay. Well, I'm at a T-Mobile in Pro Ridge, and I told this sister, hook me up with Zoom on my iPhone, and she did. And I slapped her $200, Colonel, because tonight's testimony is one of the most important you'll ever hear in Hawaiian history. As a young man, Colonel, I stayed at the home of Uncle Jim Albertini, Namalu Aina Farms, with Marion Kelly and Maivan Lam when we protested, the geothermal. Colonel, I cannot turn my head having bearing witness to have lived at the home, the 4117 Black Point Home Road, Kupiki Pikio of John and Marion Kelly. John, the lead trainer of the U.S. Navy UDT Frogmen, the leader of Save Our Surf in Hawaii. Malama, Malama Hawaii, Malama, Kalama Valley, Save Moka Whale, Sand Island, Juilliard trained, all his printing done for Kalahui, Hawaii, and Timililani Trask. I was there. I cleaned all his rollers. Kehao, Group 70, Colonel, I cannot turn my face around. And to Brother Fanene from American Samoa, you looking at a smart Hawaiian, Mr. Fanene. You in Hawaii, ne? To our brothers and sisters who testified tonight from Philippines, to Samoa, to Puerto Rico, yeah, to Iraq, to Manta, Ecuador, to Hunters Point. I was there. We were there. Okay, how? Kavika McCabe, you show me one range in Hawaii that they can clean up with the money, because Kamehameha Schools has a covenant. Make sure you clean them up and give me back. Yeah? Parker Ranch has a covenant that's saying if you're going to use my land, you're going to give me them back clean. They couldn't even do it for Kaho'olawe, and we're still begging for money. It hurts, Colonel. Colonel, don't think you're alone. We've dealt with admirals. Before there was a PACOM, it was called Sync Pack. When the President of the United States gotta come check in to the Sync Pack. That's how powerful it was. To all my brothers and sisters testifying, you talk about La Hoi Ea. I was there at Thomas Square, July 31st, honoring Marion Kelly and Dr. Cruz. Okay, how? You know who was there last night at Lilyhua Golf Course? Uncle Sparky Rodriguez, Dr. Lynette Cruz, Auntie Ann Wright, and Brother Kyle Ujiro of the Quakers. Got your PhD. You're the first PhD, Kyle, ever invite me to a dissertation defense, and it was about Kaho'olawe. And my dad gave you the scoops. Colonel, when I get threatened because I asked for an investigation in 1998 for the lack of cleanup of Kaho'olawe, and I get threatened, yeah, by the general, chief of staff, and one Hawaiian, that's not the same anymore. Okay, how? I'm ending. I cannot turn my face away. The first La Hoi Ea I've ever been was taken by Marion Kelly, led by Dr. Kekuni Blaisdell, Kapa Kau. You know who was there? Kawai Puna Prijin. You know who was there? Uncle Soline Hill, Independent Free and Nuclear Pacific. You know who was there? Kaleikoa Kaeo. You know who was there? Makanani Atwood. You know who was there? And Timoni Kiala Akaka. You know who was there? My professor, Dr. Hanani Kitras, that taught us about, yeah, Nugi Wationgo, yeah, Chinua Achebe, yeah, Richard Drinnen. We were there. We cannot turn around anymore. I may suffer. I may lose my clearance, Colonel, for testifying tonight, but I'm doing it as a citizen. Okay? And Anti-Lilikala Kame'elehiva Dorten. So, okay, how? I'm listening to all those PhD Hawaiians. Put your tenure on the line. Put it on the line. Because enough is enough already. I'm tired of this circular regeneration economies. Okay, how? I love you. I love you because you putting yourself there. We need to be there. And we'll be the intermediaries. That's the only way. Colonel, it's about bridging. My family was called traders, quislings, compradors for bridging with the U.S. Navy. That Kaho'olawe cleanup would have never happened without Dr. Emmett Aluli, Daviana McGregor, my dad, Neil Allen Proto, Waihe, Auntie Norma Wong, Dennis Dwyer, the best of the best of the best of the best. Okay, how?
Yes.
The colonel needs help. Help him. I will help you. Okay?
Thank you so much. Thank you as always.
God is love, sir. You take care of your family. We need you to be healthy too. Oʻahu. Thank you.
Mahalo nui. Mahalo nui. Okay, I think we're going straight to Colonel Misago. Okay, sorry, back to Jeff. I don't know how you follow Rani, but you can try, Jeff. And then I think the Colonel will have something to say. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Manny, and everyone for your mana this evening. Colonel Misago with some closing remarks.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for providing insight and perspective tonight. Information you shared is really appreciated, and I encourage you to stay involved in the EIS process here going forward. It'll be a long process here over the next couple of years, and then after that, we'll move on to really looking at, hey, from the record of decision of where the military moves forward. Anyway, as I opened up in the comments, we're open, we're committed to be open and transparent communication throughout the process as much as possible. And we look forward to you commenting in the next comment period as well. With that, I appreciate your time. Aloha and mahalo.